I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Raleigh City Council. The first item on our agenda is the invocation by Len Capristo. Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity for Eckankar to provide today's invocation. Honorable Mayor, City Council members, guests, fellow citizens. As we gather here today, we are reminded that the members of the City Council are approaching the end of this term, having been charged with the responsibility to maintain and promote the peace, health, comfort, convenience, good order, and general welfare for the inhabitants of the city of Raleigh. We gratefully thank you for your service. It is a tall order for anyone to serve a city of nearly 500,000 people with differing perspectives and priorities. So how do we as a community move forward facing such a challenge? One way is to remember that we are not just physical beings, we are soul. And as soul, we could become attuned to our divine spiritual nature, our true identity, for a solution to any issue. We could do this by singing a song of love to Spirit, inviting it to guide us with compassion and wisdom. This song is known by the name Hue, H-U. It is gently sung whenever we want to connect to Spirit. You doesn't belong to any group or spiritual path, but is rather a song of love that can open our hearts. Please feel free to join in or listen quietly as you choose, as we sing you to focus on the divine essence of ourselves and to become aware of the guidance it offers. We'll close our eyes and sing you gently 3 times and silently contemplate afterward. I will end by saying, may the blessings be. Hue, hue, hue. May the blessings be. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Crowder, you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I am very excited for our proclamation today. We have some members of the Carolina Courage here, so I'd like to ask Jessica McDonald, Carrie Ricaro, and Samantha Leshnak. If y'all 3 want to come up, and I will read the proclamation. Or you can just stand right here, yeah. Whereas the North Carolina Courage women's soccer team has been located in Cary since 2017, and whereas the North Carolina Courage made history in 2018 by winning their first ever Women's International Champions Cup and the Women's Soccer League Shield, and whereas in October 2019 they were victorious, winning the National Women's Soccer League title against the Chicago Red Stars 4-0, and whereas they will continue to pursue excellence under the guidance of head coach Paul Riley and play their home games at Solon Stadium at the Wake Med Park. And whereas the North Carolina Courage women's soccer team has elevated awareness of the sport and contributes to both economic partnerships as well as community relations. And whereas the City of Raleigh is proud to support and recognize this team for their impact locally, we wish them continued success on and off the field. Now therefore do I, Nancy McFarland, Mayor of the City of Raleigh, North Carolina, hereby proclaim November 19th, 2019 in the City of Raleigh as Carolina Courage Day.
Go Courage.
Okay, that takes us to our consent agenda. I do not have any items listed to be pulled.
Move for
Same-
approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So this takes us on to the report of the, and recommendation of the Planning Commission. There are some seats up front, if people that are standing in the back would like to have a seat. You can come on down. Want to note that we have 6 cases scheduled for public hearing on December 3rd.
Yes, so there's already quite a number of things, and we'll have some suggestions as to a couple items from the Planning Commission report that you could defer scheduling for a later public hearing in order to avoid overloading the December 3rd evening hearing. So, however, the first item is not on that list of things that should be deferred. This is something for which there's a strong recommendation, and for which you've already set the public hearing date of December 3rd, which is TC 619, which is addressing Section 8.3 of the UDO, which is the block perimeter requirements and new objective standards that can be used for staff to limit the application of the block perimeter cross-access driveway and stub street regulations. It would also create a new criteria for a quasi-judicial process for those items, those developments that either do not meet the objective criteria and also are facing some issue with meeting the ordinance standards. The Planning Commission reviewed this text change on November 12th and has recommended approval on a unanimous 8-0 vote.
Okay, do I have a motion for hold the public hearing on December 3rd?
Motion to approve December 3rd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Right.
Okay, next.
Next item is another text change from Planning Commission, referred from the City Council after some deliberation. TC 1319 would remove the height cap measurement in feet for buildings in the 7-story and above height categories. The text would also clarify there's structured parking when a building is stacked on top of that parking counts towards the maximum number of stories. This was also reviewed on November 12th, and the Planning Commission recommended approval 8-0. Since there is not a particular project that's dependent on the timing of this, staff would be comfortable with a January public hearing if that's the will of the council.
I move for motion for January 3rd hearing. I mean, January 7th hearing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Great.
Okay.
The third text change coming out of the Planning Commission is TC 719. This was a text change that would have created a new regulatory framework for looking at the compatibility of subdivisions in an infill context. Planning Commission reviewed this at a couple of meetings, most recently on November 12th, based on their review and some staff research on the number of lots that might be impacted. They have recommended denial of the text change on a unanimous vote of 8-0. And again, this would be, since there's no particular time crunch on this, this would be another thing that would be appropriate for January 7th.
Okay.
Move for January 7th hearing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay. So next item is at 2224 Sunnybrook Road. This is a request to rezone a little over 4 acres from R6 with Special Highway Overlay District to NX3 conditional use. This is actually being done to promote or to legalize an existing educational and recreational use on the property. Planning Commission's recommended approval on an 8-0 vote. South CAC also recommended approval on a 19-0 vote, and we're recommending a public hearing date of January 7th.
Move for approve January 7th public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So some of you may recognize this property as part of the former Old Town Planned Development District. And this is the second to last piece that needs to fall into place to remove that planned development district and allow development to go forward. This impacts about 60 acres. It's on South New Hope Road. The Planning Commission reviewed this, recommended approval on a 6-2 vote. Southeast CAC has recommended approval as well, 17 in favor. Not sure exactly what the 4 and 1 I think the refers to, and we're recommending a public hearing date of January 7th.
Motion to approve.
Actually, for this one, I'll ask that we do this one on December 3rd.
Okay.
Okay, was that a request from the?
Move for December
Okay.
3rd, public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Great. And then next item is Z2919, 5706 Rock Quarry Road, and 3801 and 3831 Pearl Road. Request to rezone this property from, which is approximately 8 acres in size, from R4 to RX3 parking limited conditional use. Planning Commission has recommended approval. It was deemed inconsistent with the future land use map, but reasonable in the public interest. The South CAC has recommended approval, and the recommended public hearing date is December 3rd.
For this one, actually, if we can have this one January 7th, because I had some questions. Well, I've received some
Okay.
questions concerning traffic. Is there a reason why it needs to be on the 3rd?
No.
Okay.
All right, so I move for January the 7th.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And that's the end of the Planning Commission report.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, that takes us to special items. First item is rezoning case Z1119.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So this item, Z1119, is a request to rezone a property at 510 Grove Avenue. You heard this at your last meeting last month, and the request was to close the public hearing and hold the item for additional discussion. So just a bit of background on this request. It's about a half acre in size. Request is to rezone from R6 to R10 and retain the special parking overlay district. Staff and the Planning Commission have deemed this to be consistent with the future land use map and comprehensive plan. The West CAC recommends denial 6-4. Planning Commission recommends approval 5-1. So as I mentioned, this hearing was closed. There were questions about stormwater on this property and the impacts of development and stormwater. So public hearing has been closed. The applicant has offered a new stormwater condition. We've got staff here that can answer any questions about that condition. I believe the applicant is here to speak as well, if you so choose. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, does anyone have any questions of staff? Does anyone have any questions about the stormwater?
So it's right off Western Boulevard at Simmons Branch, and so we had asked for some more condition or stormwater elements to be looked at and determined if it would help with the flooding of the existing properties around it. After having a conversation with a few people who live in and around the area who deal with the, even before this project is done, with the constant flooding that occurs, I'm not going to be inclined to be able to support 510 Grove Avenue's rezoning.
Do you feel like the stormwater conditions that they put in are not sufficient?
It may be, but it's an area that is prone to flooding all the time. And if we're adding more density here with more impervious and roof surfaces, I just think that the culmination of the fact that these folks constantly deal with drainage and stormwater problems is not something I'd want to add to.
Okay. I guess I just want to ask if the stormwater conditions that were added, would they in any way help there? There was a retention pond and something else.
So what the applicants have offered is stormwater control that is above what normally would be required by the code. So it would be an increase in stormwater controls. I'm not going to speak to the specifics because I'll get them wrong, but we've got stormwater professionals here that could speak to it.
Well, it's above the code for the redevelopment, but is that gonna help what's occurring now, is the question.
Right, and that's a great question. I would defer to stormwater staff
Okay.
for that.
I would have the same question for stormwater staff. Yeah.
Good afternoon. So related to 510 Grove Avenue, because there is documented downstream flooding from this location, that automatically imposes additional controls that would be required with development of the site to not only control the 2 and the 10, which is normally controlled, but also a 25-year and 100-year storm. So those would be required regardless of any rezoning conditions. The conditions that were offered in addition to that are a volume control for a 1.4-inch storm. So after development, the volume of stormwater could not be any greater than the volume that was coming off of that site before development. And they've also offered that grassed swales be used to channel flow to a common location. So those were the 2 controls that were added. Stormwater staff did suggest a 3-to-1 side slope maximum. That one was not offered by the applicant.
So even with the improvements, it's not going to be better than it is now? Is that what you're saying?
It would stay the same, is
stay
the
the same.
objective of what we're suggesting. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think here, it's still ability to rezone at to build at R6 still exists there, but it is just an area that is constantly wet and floods, and I just don't want to add more density there to an already pretty meaningful flood area today.
Okay. So I'm just asking, so if they have the ability to do R6 and they develop it with that, then they are just required for the 2 and 10-year storm?
The 25-year and 100-year would be automatically required even
because of
without the conditions because of the documented downstream structural flooding that has occurred in the past.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a
Thank you.
motion. So I'm going to make a motion to deny rezoning Z1119.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Hold on.
Just 1 second. We still have got, where's Travis? You have to still do a consistency statement if you're going to deny
That's
it.
good. I just don't, my computer wouldn't load, so would you read that, Mr. Thompson?
I don't think there's one in your packet to
Not for
deny it. I think
You have to read it for denial?
That's correct. So the
you can
Can you just
potentially-
say- And I can just change it to,
Denied, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
After considering the policy maps and other materials included as part of the comprehensive plan, the council determined that the proposed rezoning amendment is inconsistent with comprehensive plan and other adopted plans and should be denied. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
So your second item, Z1519, is a request to rezone just about 12 and a half acres of property at Six Forks and Industrial Drive, rezone from IX3 parking limited to RX7 green conditional use. Staff and the Planning Commission have deemed this to be consistent with comprehensive plan and future land use map. Planning Commission recommends approval of this 6-0, as does the Atlantic CAC 15-0. This public hearing has been opened, but you might remember this request was sent to Growth and Natural Resources for additional discussion. And actually, public hearing was closed at your last meeting on November 6th to allow for additional conversation. So this item appears later on your agenda as a committee report, but we're still at the public hearing portion of the agenda. So the applicants have offered new conditions, and the City Council can take action on this case as you see fit. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this request.
Is there anything different in the GNR report?
No, I was just looking at it. there's not, I think what they offered was the affordable housing, right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And some
I
parking
think what,
limitations.
I started saying, and Russ, I think what they'd asked for is if they have to include affordable housing, they wanted additional height. And I think they were going to do a new application, and it would be 40 stories.
No,
That's not for this
Oh,
one.
sorry, that's the KM. Sorry. I got too many on this sheet.
So I believe the condition that has been offered
Sorry.
here is an offer
Right.
for affordable housing that is, would commit to affordable units that are above and beyond the existing entitlement today. So the way the math plays out for this is the delta between existing zoning and proposed would be about 210 units. And so the applicants have offered a certain percentage of those units to be affordable.
I need my computer.
Okay, do we have any other questions? The hearing was closed on the 6th, so if we have a
Motion to approve.
motion.
Can we do the consistency statement too?
Here you go.
Thanks. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 19, 2019, containing the agenda material and to be approved, the zoning amendment.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, next we have rezoning Z2518. Oh, I'm sorry. It's your job.
Thank you. So your final case under special items, this is Z2518. It's a piece of property at 4315 Lead Mine Road. This might look familiar. It's recently been through a rezoning within the past few years. A request is to rezone almost 11 acres of property from commercial mixed use 12 stories conditional use to commercial mixed use 7 stories parking limited conditional use. Staff and the Planning Commission have deemed this consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use map. Planning Commission recommends approval 7-0, as does the Northwest CAC, although that was a split vote 6-2. Public hearing was opened in May, was held open to allow for additional review at the committee level. So this conversation continued at the Growth and Natural Resources Committee, and there was discussion about access onto this property. If you've been through this area, you know this is somewhat of a challenged location from a traffic standpoint. So the Growth and Natural Resources Committee did consider this item and referred it back to the City Council when the public hearing was closed. So the applicant, since the closing of the hearing, has offered new conditions about access to the site, maximum density, tree conservation area, and certain uses being prohibited. So again, public hearing is closed and this is ready for your action. I'm happy to answer any questions for you.
I did talk to Mr. Thompson and Ms. Trejos a little bit about it, just the concern about not having access at the light, because I don't know how you'll go north to try and take a left out of there, but is the concern stacking onto Glenwood?
Yes, ma'am. As I understand it, there was conversation about access into the site. So if there was a northbound movement from Lead Mine into the site, there would be some challenge getting across the southbound traffic. So if I understand the conditions correctly, the applicants have offered a condition that would limit the access on Lead Mine only for emergency service.
At the light, but they still have
They have to go up to,
upper access.
That's correct.
they have
That's
actually
correct.
2 other places to go up on Lead Mine, which is better. Thank you, Mayor, for asking that question. It was a concern of all of us. We did listen to it in GNR. This is in my district, and we have worked with them, and they have met our requests. So I want to move for approval.
Second.
We're gonna do a consistency statement?
Yes?
Oh, I have one more question.
Just an idea.
Doesn't look like there's any access to Marriott Drive.
I'm usually the one.
Is there any
That's
access?
correct.
to
There is no
Marriott?
access to
No
Marriott
access
Drive.
to Marriott
That's
Drive.
correct.
But we do have a handicap access to Crabtree Valley Mall at the west end of the property. We asked them to put that in with ramps, and they've done that.
Did you try to get access to Marriott Drive?
They did try.
That would have helped. Okay, sorry.
Consistency statement, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 19th, 2019, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm just going to interject real quick. On that very first one where we denied, actually, that denial consistency statement had to state why that the denial was inconsistent and that the denial was reasonable and in the public interest. So I think that you could amend that motion and say that it was inconsistent because of the stormwater effects, and that therefore to deny it would be reasonable and in the public interest.
Okay. I'm getting things to work
I
here.
just want to make sure that we included all of the elements in that denial.
Okay,
You're not used
I've
to
got it.
having one that you weren't prepared for, so
okay, I got it. So
it
I'll
took me
say-
a minute to
Mayor,
get
may
ready.
I add this amendment? So move to deny because it was inconsistent with comp plan because of potential adverse stormwater effects, and therefore the denial is reasonable and is in the public interest.
And that was for Z1119 Grove Avenue.
Z11.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Opposed?
thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Avon Ferry Corridor Study.
Good afternoon. So the next item, CP1C19, this is a deferred item, and what it does is it proposes street amendments to the Mission Valley Shopping Center site. A quick recap: on September 17th, Council had adopted the report and recommendations of the Avon Ferry Corridor Study, and along with that, is a package of comp plan amendments recommended by the study that was packaged as CP119. All of the items were adopted with the exception of one deferred item, which is now back for your review. And I guess the motion on 17th also recommended that we hold it until the text change, which is TC 1119, was approved, and the TC 1119 was just approved on November 6th, so we felt like it was appropriate to bring this back for your review. I am happy to give a quick recap again. This was part of the Avon Ferry Corridor Study that focused on Avon Ferry between Western Boulevard going all the way to Tryon Road, and we had two focus areas that we looked at closely for future redevelopment scenarios, and one was the Mission Valley site and the other Avon Ferry Shopping Center. So the street networks proposed for Avon Ferry has been adopted yet, and this is the pending item. Again, the issue in question was the parking related to shopping centers, which the text change TC 1119 has taken care of. So unless there's any questions, I'm happy to, and we have
It says two things. At the top, it says amend the street plan to identify new streets, and at the bottom, Planning Commission recommends removing these.
Okay,
new streets.
that's right. So quick recap. So the Planning Commission, when they reviewed this item, because of the pertinent parking issue, they recommended denial, or rather removing these streets at this point, and instead made an alternate recommendation for adding a policy statement that should the site be redeveloped at a future point through a rezoning process, the street connectivity would be applied. So
I have a
Yes,
question.
Susan.
If the goal had been originally that we make this more of a village center as opposed to just being a sea of parking,
That's correct.
that was our goal as we looked, and that was the group of people who were involved for a year as it relates to this area in growth, correct?
Yes. So I know that we had given more information when we presented the Avon Ferry Corridor Study, but a quick recap. Again, the goal was a reminder that we have the Western Boulevard Corridor Study that's kicked off, that's going to look at BRT along Western Boulevard, and we have a future potential BRT stop right at the location of intersection of Western and Avon Ferry. So in the future, we would be looking and have recommended this site for TOD because it will be within a quarter mile of a future BRT station as well. So that was also part of the reason we anticipate more of a transit-oriented, walkable, urban type environment. Again, looking at a future redevelopment scenario, this does not change the current conditions.
I can't imagine why we wouldn't want, part of the purpose of the study was to re-envision that shopping center, the one at the corner of Avon Ferry and Gorman, and then the corridor itself to make it more pedestrian friendly, not necessarily as much vehicular. or to add that to the vehicular. So I would want to ask council to approve adding the streets to the shopping center as proposed.
I would say the opposite. I would say the point, the shopping center, we know that entire area at some point will be redeveloped, and how those roads are laid out would be worked out at the site plan. So why would we want to cut that in half with proposed roads when we don't have any idea what that redevelopment would look like? I'm more inclined to go with the Planning Commission's recommendation to remove those.
So did I hear that there was some sort of compromise language that would be inserted as a policy saying
Yes.
that the intent of these lines on the page would be accomplished at a rezoning, maybe not in a smaller scale redevelopment, but at a rezoning?
At a
And so that was
larger
so that's, sounds like the compromise to me is to get the intent into the policy without drawing specific street lines here.
Okay.
I just
so
want to make
what's
sure
the-
that's the way that Councilor
That's-
Crowder reads it.
I'm just,
That's the way I had understood it as we'd moved forward. And we pulled this one out because we wanted to have more discussion with the management company of Mission Valley, correct?
That's correct.
And we know that this is an area that we will redevelop. And we just want to make sure that we give as much direction as it relates to redevelopment from a pedestrian and vehicular standpoint moving forward. That's why they added the policy language.
So one point to note is that we did do some in-house design, preliminary design scenarios. And one thing, if this entire block were to redevelop in future, we would be requiring under the UDO, it would not meet the block parameters, so we would have to interject with new streets. And so what we have shown is potential new connections so that we could build or create more of a buildable block based on more of an urban environment. So we're not extensively showing a lot of new streets, but essentially trying to accomplish more of an urban grid and a block that and also with the intention to provide connection between Avon Ferry and Centennial Parkway.
so since the development, I just want to ask you if what Mr. Stevenson said is what?
Correct. That's what we worked out in Planning Commission, was to tie the street network within Mission Valley to future development scenarios, not put it in the overall street plan, which could be triggered even when there's not like a redevelopment of the shopping center.
So my question is, what's the specific policy language that's going to enforce a more urbanized form at time of rezoning?
There is specific language in the corridor plan that refers to the street
Looks
network.
like I'm
within-
kind of wanting to
I'm
hear
not sure it
the
does,
staff say
though.
that.
Ask the question again.
So we did include the policy in the last round that was adopted,
Right.
which went into this section under area plan chapter.
Not included.
And
It's not included or is included? I just want to hear what the words are, so it sounds like it's going to guide the implementation of the intent here.
Yep, if you give me just a second, I can pull up the exact language that was approved in the comprehensive plan amendment.
Say that those scenarios are still in the plan too, the pictures.
Yep, so if you see on the screen here, APAF 7,
Okay.
the recommendation was to add street connectivity to the statement about public amenities. And it says, and I'll skip to the end, the policy refers to figures, if you might remember, that were shown as a part of the policy language. And it says, appropriate design concepts to achieve the intended level of public amenities and street connectivity that warrant increased building height should be considered in the rezoning of the property. And so that is included in the language that was adopted as policy guidance for the small area plan.
But not specific
I
to
didn't hear
Mission
anything
Valley.
about urban,
Yep, so the full policy is lengthy, and I can read it to you in full. It says, policy APA of 7, Mission Valley building height and open space. The language is building height at the Mission Valley Shopping Center should not exceed 7 stories along Avon Ferry Road and Centennial Parkway. Taller buildings should be considered internally to the shopping center in exchange for public amenities such as parks, plazas, or pedestrian promenades. Rezoning requests that exceed the recommendations of Table LU2 recommended height designations should only be considered in exchange for the highest quality of public amenities. Reference figures APAF 1, 2, and 3 for appropriate design concepts to achieve the intended level of public amenities and street connectivity, that was the amended language, that warrant increased building height.
Okay.
Rezoning requests that deliver high-quality public amenities as intended in this policy shall not be considered inconsistent with the recommendations of Table LU2.
Right. So what I heard Councilor Crowder say is we want to avoid a suburban sea of parking. And that's, to me, that's what that proposed street layout is trying to do as well. It's trying to create, as she said, an urban village. So I didn't hear that specific intent in that statement. I heard provide more amenities, but so I'm.
Yep, and so I'll show you basically the illustration that is used to guide those policy decisions. This is one of 3 scenarios in the plan that was approved. And so the intent of that policy is to deliver this type of design, and that's what that
Without
language is
specifying those specific streets.
That's right. And keep in mind, the street plan is used to identify the future corridors of where streets may be located through a development. Their exact location can move so long as they connect point A to point B. But what the Planning Commission recommended and was ultimately approved, aside from these specific street locations, was to include policy language that would result in a similar development pattern.
Right.
I mean, that is what you have approved so far.
All right, well, obviously this one shows parking decks, the sort of the existing layout that Councilor Crowder is worried about continuing is more of a big sea of service parking. I'm not sure we're getting there.
I'm just not sure, the road that's on, that's shown, the street that's shown interior to this that cuts it in half, that doesn't guarantee you anything. I mean, that doesn't guarantee you that you won't have a sea of parking. So I don't know why you wouldn't take that off, and then when the site plan comes forward, it would be developed at that, the road network would be developed at that time.
Was it to make that connection that they were fearful wouldn't happen if we didn't put it on the plan?
So the site plan standards have block perimeter based on the zoning district. And that we have to approve a site plan that meets those standards regardless of how they connect it from point A to point B. Putting something in the street plan, which I believe it was effectively these 2 alignments, and then every other thing on here was intended to be potentially private or an additional to or something else, helps give some specificity to the rest of the network of where those points of connection might be and give some guidance to the developer. Now, if they want to put it over here through site plan and it's on the street plan, it can do that. But if there is a if a site plan comes in without having the street plan behind it, we have very little guidance on what that should look like, and there's very little information to neighboring property owners and to other stakeholders of what that should eventually look like. So the block perimeter standards do provide some of that, but by putting it on the street plan, it helps tell the development community in the future and development services staff what it should look like.
So then how do you ensure the connectivity without restricting the potential for the development that goes there? I don't want to make them, I mean, they may come up with something incredibly creative that they still have connectivity, but it's not 2 roads that cut the site in half, in quarters.
Well, it's really just a guideline to show connections. Am I right?
Yes,
no
it's more about the network structure, and that we want,
Not
if the proposal comp plan amendment was adopted, we would have streets that would connect in that way. If they wanted to change some of the intersections within that or something, that would be still meet the intent of the street plan. If they wanted to propose something completely different and bring a comp plan amendment to city council in the future because they had a better idea and the future city council agreed with that, then that's another process to do that with. Without the street plan, there is no site plan standard that can hold any sort of connectivity other than the general block perimeter standard, which is not very specific. It doesn't say a lot about what the street width should be or what the street type, street design should be. And the area-specific guidance, which was added, is really triggered during a rezoning and during Planning Commission and City Council's review of that rezoning. If they came in with a site plan with the existing zoning, there'd be no way to really consider that. Development Services just generally does not look at the comp plan in considering site plan applications. They're only looking at the code.
So question, as far as those streets that are placed right now, if they come up with a plan, that layout is basically just showing that you have to have the connectivity. It does not say it has to be located exactly at those areas.
Correct. Yeah, this is not survey accurate by any means, and it isn't intended to be survey accurate. There's a lot of times when subdivisions come in more greenfield areas where we have streets mapped, and the engineers of the subdividing parties figure out that a slightly better alternative works, and those plans are approved.
Okay, so
I'm going to make
I want to ask Mac because, they've spent a lot of time working on all of this whole corridor thing, and they had some language that ties the street network to the future development. So can you just explain that to me so that we're...
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, and I mean, Jason just kind of made the point. Our concern is that any site plan, regardless if it's tied to this future redevelopment scenario, would trigger street dedication. And then it would put the onus on the owners to have to take some step to change that or modify that. I think what came out of Planning Commission was let's tie the street network, which we all agree we want Mission Valley to be a walkable urban environment, but that's going to take a significant redevelopment scenario.
Right.
So it tied, again, the street network to the vision that we're trying to achieve rather than any site plan triggering us into a series of processes to try to deal with it at that level.
So you're saying if you had a site plan for any piece of this, with this, it would trigger all of this as opposed to whether you could redevelop it all at once?
It won't.
Yes, well, any site...
Trying to avoid.
What they could, let's say, as a for instance, that they wanted to build a larger building here, they would have to submit a phase subdivision of which they would only have to build a portion of those improvements. They'd have to have the other future phases of the subdivision laid out in concept at that point. So that, I guess it's partially true that they would have to do all of the improvements, but they wouldn't have to complete all those improvements. They would have to plan all of those improvements. One of the things that changed between Planning Commission's recommendation and now was the adoption of TC11, which removed any building upfits or tenant changes from a site plan status, which was a serious concern. And I think that was part of what Planning Commission was concerned about, was recognizing that turning a movie theater into a performance venue or something would have triggered all of these improvements in a way that would have been inappropriate.
We were trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to understand the language that you said, understand kind of what came out of the Planning Commission.
Talking to me?
No, I'm talking to Mac.
Okay.
Staff came forward with language that ties the street work in Mission Valley to all future development. As you said, you supported that, which encourages connectivity. How is that different than what we're looking at?
This would require a dedication. It's all one property, so any site plan, TC11 does help. We appreciate y'all passing that. I know that was in the works. But again, there could be lots of other site plans that are not this redevelopment scenario. So what the Planning Commission recommendation did was to put language that said if you want to take advantage of the guidance for greater height, you would have to provide the street connectivities as an amenity along with all the other public amenities that the vision and plan talked about. So we feel that's a much better way to handle the issue of the connectivity. Again, we support that. We want it tied to the future redevelopment and taking advantage of the plan aspects of greater height. rather than any site plan.
So let me just, I'm trying to help. So you don't want the line on the map until and you want to decide where that connectivity goes when you do a large redevelopment?
That's correct. We're fine with it being on the map of the scenarios as scenarios, but not on the street plan network. In the overall street plan, which then triggers.
I understand. You probably would want some language, if that's where everybody's going, that makes it clear that it doesn't have the same effect as if it was on the street plan.
So you want it on the map as a scenario, not part of the overall
Not
street?
on the map, in the plan as a scenario, not on the street map.
Or connectivity that could be satisfied in that way or some other comparable, equal way, right?
That's correct. I mean, we felt like we accomplished that in Planning Commission. If there's a need for some additional language in that paragraph about making that clearer, we're absolutely fine with that. And we all, I think, are trying to get to the same goal. It's just
We would
that.
all appreciate some clearer language right now.
Clarity.
I have a question.
Hey, Matt,
So-
do you have that language?
David has a question.
So we don't like am I hearing that we're not comfortable with the planning commission's attempt to satisfy the developer and the community? Is that what I'm understanding here?
No, that's what I
'Cause that's
said.
what
I
they
was
worked on.
supporting the planning commission's
Yeah, so
recommendation, so that is on as a possible scenario, but it's not part of the street plan.
So what we took from the Planning Commission in preparing this document for your review was a compromise based on what the operators of Mission Valley had requested and still maintaining the intent of the area plan, which is to bring connectivity in conjunction with a large-scale redevelopment. The applicants are concerned that they would have to build streets that would be required if any type of redevelopment happened, and not one that necessarily fulfilled the intent of the large-scale redevelopment envisioned in the plan. And so the policy language, as all of our comprehensive plan policies are used to, will provide guidance for City Council to consider in the negotiation of a future rezoning. And so that's the purpose, is to consider creating additional connectivity to serve a more intense land use in the event of a future rezoning. And so we know now that the Mission Valley Shopping Center is zoned for 3-story height. And so to achieve any of the vision of the Mission Valley in the Avon Ferry plan, a rezoning would be required. And at that time, City Council would use the policy guidance to create connectivity, as opposed to having it triggered at an administrative level for any type of site change or design that triggers the UDO threshold.
I have a question. So if they don't go for a rezoning and we don't have the street connectivity specified, the property could be redeveloped as a suburban grocery store anchored shopping plaza. Is that correct?
So they would still be required to have some semblance of street connectivity through the UDO requirements of block perimeter, which it is likely not to meet as it exists today. So some street and some public connectivity would be required.
Right, but that could just be basically a cut-through street through a shopping plaza with 2 entrances, one on Avon Ferry and one on Centennial, for example.
That's right. So some street that connected the two Centennial Parkway to Avon Ferry Road.
So with the street plan, that gives us a little bit better guarantee of creating a non-urban or a non-suburban project.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay.
And it's really any development versus a large-scale development. That's what we're battling back and forth right now as far as the street plan. Okay.
Make a motion to approve the recommendation by the planning commission to the council.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council here. So this brief presentation on the Dunn Road parking at Bedford Village here, Councilor Cox had brought this up at the 11/6 meeting, wanted us to look at no parking along Dunn Road. So a little bit of the agenda here. I'll touch on the approved development plan and then basically give staff's recommendation on this here. So a quick overview of the map here. So to your left is Falls in this Road. Across the top here, the project site is Dunn Road today. And then of course highlighted is the actual property that is under construction right now. So the property to the south of that is actually a assisted living facility that is open now. So the project site there highlighted is the area that we're talking about today. This is existing Dunn Road today, so 22 feet of pavement on one side, as you can see the median to your left, and then basically a mirror image of what we have on this side. So 22 feet of pavement. Over to your right would be the project site if you're looking down Dunn Road. So this is basically coming off Falls of the Noose and looking down Dunn Road today. A little bit about the approved site plan. So mixed use, it's got residential and retail. It's 179 parking spaces on site. And talking to the contractor the other day, they're looking at late March, early April of 2020 for an opening. So just a little bit about the approved site plan. Let's see. So this here is going to be the Dunkin' Donuts, just to give you some perspective on what's on the site plan. They're looking at a Bricks Pizza, a Public House, which is a restaurant, a butcher shop, and a wine, I believe a wine store. So that is what is going to be along the ground floor retail. I think 32 residential units above. So this area over here is kind of what they've designated as their retail parking. And then here on the back here is what they basically have dedicated for their residential parking here. So again, 179 spaces on site. This right here is a right in, right out. This over here to your far right is a full movement out on the Dunn Road. This is just, excuse me here, sorry about that. This is just a rendering out looking basically from Dunn Road onto the property. There you can see the retail along the ground floor and then residential above. So again, just a rendering kind of the scale of the development here. And I'm going to just jump right to the recommendation. So based on what we're seeing today, our recommendation would be is to let the site open, which again, they're looking at late March, early April of next year. Let's let the traffic patterns normalize and then kind of see if we've got any issues out there on Dunn Road. If we do, then staff's recommendation would be to bring that back to the full council if we see any concerns out there along Dunn Road. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
So Paul, did any of this have to do with construction traffic?
No, so again, we've just got a wide area of pavement out on Dunn Road, so I actually
Could you bring the map? Could you bring the map up?
Yeah.
You know, showing the drawing. The issue is the curvature of the road. You'll notice, and so that when you're driving north on Falls of Noose, what you often get almost all the time is a green arrow to turn right. And so if you're turning right on the Dunn Road and you're coming off of Falls of Noose at 45 miles an hour and you turn right and you've got all that curvature there, and then there's a right in, right out into the shopping plaza, the concern is that if there are cars parked on Dunn Road in that location, then there's potential for a lot of conflicts, which could lead to accidents. And so it's a safety concern. It's also an aesthetic concern because for years the area has been built out. There's never been any parking on Dunn Road in that location. So I think between the safety concerns, the other safety concern is that when you go past the right in, right out entrance, you come to a second entrance, and that second entrance will be used primarily by the Aspens, which is the senior center, which has like 190 apartments in it. It's also used by a daycare center. And then it would also be used by the retail that's under construction as well as the residents that would be living above that retail. So there's a lot of traffic that's going to be coming and going. Currently, the Aspens, out of the 190 units that they have, they've rented about 45 units. So it hasn't even been fully rented out yet. So I'm trying to get a little bit ahead on the safety issues. The curvature presents, I think, some line of sight challenges. And so rather than, I mean, we can certainly wait and see how many accidents we get and then take action. Or we can wait and see how many cars are actually parked on the road before taking action. But I'm more of a proactive person, and I would like to direct staff to move forward and put into this area a no parking restriction.
So the site has 179,
79 spaces on site, yes.
I mean, do you imagine that that's not going to be enough?
So, again, don't want to say, and in all honesty, Mr. Cox, you know, a lot of traffic, again, it would just be staff's recommendation to, let's just see, again, personally, I think it's a challenge to park out on Dunn Road, but again, I would just want to wait and see. If it does become that issue, then happy to.
Well, certainly if the parking is not adequate, I mean, one would hope that the parking would be adequate internal to the property. But there are, as you mentioned, there will be several retail spaces or retail businesses there. And if you go to Lafayette Village, for example, I was there the other night, and there's a lot of parking along the residential streets external to Lafayette Village. And what I really want to do is to prevent another situation like that.
Sure, understand.
So I mean, so to move this forward, if I don't know if I have the support of the rest of the council or not, but I would like to ask the council to direct staff.
Motion. I'm just looking at it, and I'm looking at the street, I'm looking at this diagram, and I'm just not, I understand what you're saying, but I don't see.
Well, let me ask this.
Why someone would
If the
park.
if the anticipation is that nobody is going to park on Dunn Road, then there's certainly no harm in putting the signs up that say no parking.
So aesthetics, so not to be funny or anything, but you mentioned aesthetically pleasing, and all of a sudden now you're gonna have all these no parking signs.
I don't think there would be that many no parking signs that it'll be a problem. I think that, you know, that a few no parking signs is preferable to having cars parked on Dunn Road. But as you say, if the anticipation is that they will be parking internal to the site, then there's certainly no harm in designating this as a no parking area.
With all due respect, I think we're solving for a problem that isn't a problem yet, and may never be. So I would like to follow staff's recommendation and just wait and see. I think there's something to you tell somebody not to do it, and then they're going to do it. So I would really like to follow staff's recommendation on this one.
That's fine. So I would like to make a motion.
A couple comments, if I may, Mayor.
Sure.
So turning off of Falls of Noose onto Dunn, I mean, there is, my own experience is that, yeah, there's a lot of trips that just sort of swing on through there and only decelerate it the minimal amount because they know it's a big wide road ahead. Of course, as I'm looking at the site plan here, I'm seeing some indications of site triangles, and I'm seeing that site distance triangle that points back towards Falls of Noose comes right across where a parked car would obscure that. So at least from the segment up until the right in, right out access, it seemed like it was, I'm not an engineer, but it's an obvious safety concern that you don't ever want to have to figure out why a person might choose to park there, because it's always going to be unsafe. So that's my opinion on that one. On the outbound, I'm seeing dedicated turn lanes heading westbound onto Falls of Noose. So clearly near the intersection, you're never going to want to have parking there because those lanes are all dedicated for traffic movement.
Sure.
And as I look at the striping that's shown on the site plan, all the way up until the new lane gets added for the southbound, one of the southbound trips, that's striped for moving traffic too. It's not striped for parking for a while and then turn left or right further on up. So it seemed like in both of those circumstances, there's really ample reasons to say we're never, as you said, no one in their right mind would ever park there. So let's go ahead and make sure someone doesn't do something dangerous that we don't expect by putting in at least some parking control closer to the Falls of Noose Dunn intersection. So I'm gonna.
So I'll make a motion to ask staff to develop a no parking plan for this area, and bring that plan back to council so that.
Chew on it.
Well, I would like to have it implemented. I mean, I would like to have it so that we can implement this plan.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
at least review it before you implement it.
Right.
All right, I'll second that motion.
And Mr. Branch had a question?
I was going to say, how far down Dunn were you asking them to look at?
I'll allow staff to make that determination as to how far down Dunn it should go for their review.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. 5-3.
4-4.
Oh, 4-4. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor McFarland and City Council. My name is Will Shoemaker. Have been recently brought on board to head up the traffic calming group. I know you're used to seeing Jed up here talking, but hopefully I can be a good change of pace for you guys today.
I'm sure that was a compliment.
He's happy.
Welcome change of pace. I apologize.
We're just trying to inject a little humor in the traffic calming.
Traffic calming us.
So an agenda for what we're going to be talking about today, just the NTMP goals, a little program history, some of the policy changes that we've gone over the past couple years, a policy overview, and then we can get into the Falls, River Avenue, the two sections in the Whittington that were brought up by Councilmember Cox at the last meeting, as well as our recommendation at the end. So the goal of the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program is to provide and promote safe streets, to promote positive quality of life for our city's neighborhoods. And we have 3 tools to accomplish that. They are speed limit reductions, multi-way stops, and then traffic calming projects, which is what we're going to talk a little bit more in depth today. A little program history. In 2009, the first NTMP program policy was adopted. In 2015, components of the program were referred to the subcommittee to look at some changes. In 2016, while the NTMP policy was in committee, the entire program was evaluated through a peer review where we went out and looked at the 100 largest cities that had traffic calming programs to see how we compared to them. In 2017, the Transportation and Transit Committee recommended changes for the policy, and City Council approved it at that point. And then in 2018, there were a few more changes that had to do with the participation and support thresholds with the public involvement aspects, namely the balloting process itself. So in 2017, what was adopted, the scoring criteria was adjusted to better reflect impacts from traffic. That was where we put a higher a higher weight on things like walkability. Is there commerce in the area? Are there schools? Are there parks? Are there pedestrian drivers to get them out and to walk, as well as the sidewalk connectivity in the neighborhood? We implemented a 5-year time limit for eligible projects once they've been placed on the list. As we know, Raleigh is growing very rapidly. So something that didn't have a problem 5 years ago, new development comes in, we want the most current data, as well as conversely, If a street has a problem and the development occurs and it punches through a street, it could solve the problem. So we want to make sure that we have an active list that has good and current data. We raised the minimum scores for project applicability from 30 to 40 for the narrower and the wider streets. That was for project expectation. A lot of the projects that we get to have scores 60 plus. So if you're making the list at 30, we weren't setting a good expectation of having a project eventually. So we wanted to make sure that that had a reasonable floor to make sure that we could treat streets that made the list. And we also increased the public meeting involvement by including the residents within a 2-block radius of the street that had the traffic calming issue or the vehicular speed compliance issue. We realized that the people on the street live with it day to day, but the neighborhood, the greater neighborhood, does drive those same streets, so there is an impact to their daily commutes and daily lives. There's more changes that happened in 2017. We replaced the show of public support from a citizen-circulated petition to a staff-mailed ballot. That was an attempt to make sure that we controlled the message and someone wasn't going out and having people sign something that they weren't really well informed about. This gives our direct contact information, so if there are any questions, the citizens and the residents are directed back to us directly as opposed to asking their neighbors and getting misinformed. And we added a second show of support, another balloting at the end of the process, asking, do you want this project as designed? We'd run into the issues before with the first step. People were interested in learning about it and interested about having a project designed, but then whenever it came to the actual implementation, people weren't happy. They wanted more or less. This gives them a second chance to voice their concerns and actually vote yes, no on a project that they've seen and helped us work on. And also the show of support was changed to include the greater neighborhood. And again, the neighborhood was defined as a parcel within a 2-block radius of the subject street. So in the past, we only really interfaced with people on the street itself. And then the couple tweaks that happened in 2018, we adjusted the participation thresholds for balloting for residents living on the street. It went from a 60% participation to 50%. And then we raised the minimum score for the wider streets from the 40 that it was a couple years back to 70 where it stands today. So an overview of the policy. Traffic calming is a very polarizing solution, and it's never perfect. Traffic calming is done by speed humps, which elongate the road through vertical treatments, or horizontal deflection that cause a little bit of a swerving motion as you drive through. But both of these things can be seen as an inconvenience. So this program is set up to be a citizen-driven process where the neighborhood is invited to come forth and make choices. They're the ones that are going to be living with the speed humps or the horizontal deflections. They're going to be the ones that live with this project. We don't want them to be dissatisfied and in a couple years come back to us and say that, well, we'd rather have the speeding than the humps. So we want them to be involved so that we get a very highly rated and a very effective project. The program currently puts more emphasis on the residents living on the subject streets because they deal with the negative consequences of people speeding in front of their properties. But we do listen to the greater neighborhood. We know that their voice matters as well, but there is an equitable thing here where we try to put that into the program policy. So we have multiple touch points throughout this policy to make sure that there is as much citizen involvement as possible. We have an introductory meeting where we get them all together, go over what traffic calming is, go over potential timelines, go over the different treatment types available to them, and really set it up for what we can do to help them. Then we send out a ballot to the street and the neighborhood and say, would you like to explore traffic calming? If it meets the minimum benchmarks, we move to the preliminary design phase, where we put, as staff, make our best traffic calming design, but then invite them to come out and touch and feel and move the humps or chicanes or whatever it may be around to the areas where they find, they think the problem areas are the worst, to make sure we have the most effective project. After that, it's one thing to look at squares or whatnot on a piece of paper. We actually go out and paint the streets so people can drive it, where sometimes we have groups that go overboard and put them every property line, and then we paint it on the road. They realize that, oh my gosh, this was too much. Or the opposite happens where they think, oh, let's just put 3 out there, but then when they drive it, it takes forever to get from one hump to another. So it lets them visualize what the potential project that they'll have will be. We go after that and then have a comment period that is associated with that marking. We come back to a final design where we've tweaked and we've heard the comments. Usually this is a pretty easy meeting because everyone's talked about it. It's just formalization of what we've already discussed. Then we send out a final ballot that said, do you want the project as designed? If they meet the warrants, we come to you and request a public hearing that gives one more chance for the public to come and voice their opinions to you, and then ultimately you give us the go-ahead to move on with the construction phase. So the Falls River Avenue and the 2 sections and Whittington Drive. Whittington Drive is A down here. Falls River is split up with Wide River or Bedfordtown kind of being the division point. But as you can see, Whittington Drive, the on-street is the dark red. That's the abutting properties. That's what we consider as the on-street participants. And then the lighter red is what we consider the 2-block radius of the neighborhood. When we get outside of a normal grid pattern, it's a little bit more difficult to define exactly a 2-block radius. So we try to look at, as best we can, what a 2-block radius is and who's going to best utilize those streets within a reasonable difference. And to give you a breakdown, and then overall the purple, we had a listening session with the entire neighborhood at the end of October, and that's what you see as what we consider as the entire neighborhood of the Falls River and Bedford community, but that includes the 3 sections in red. Here's a ballot comparison. So Whittington Drive, it consists of 266 ballots, so the breakdown, 63 on-street, 203 neighborhood. Falls River, 249 total ballots, and then the second section of Falls River is 274 ballots. The entire neighborhood, if we would go to a balloting of the entire neighborhood as defined by the purple, that would be an additional 3,050 properties that we engage with. So the total ballot count, if we go by the policy, would be 789. If we look at a balloting of the entire neighborhood, it would be closer to 4,000 ballots that we would send out asking for neighborhood feedback and participation. And so our recommendation at this point is to move forward with the 2 sections of Falls River Avenue and the 1 section of Whittington Drive per the currently adopted NTMP policy, but we'd like to hear from you and get some direction on how we want to move forward.
Well, this is in my district, and I recommend that we adopt your recommendation. I have no real concerns about it because I know that the rest of the neighborhood, if they're concerned, they will definitely let the council know.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And council, Mayor, if I could, while they're loading the next little or getting ready for the next little discussion, appreciate the extra time spent on that particular item. It had been a little while since we'd had that discussion, and it gave us an opportunity to introduce a new staff person who's going to be out and about on this topic. So thank you for allowing us to spend a few extra minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have an update for you on the the potential Cameron Village NCOD. Just to remind you of the process to date. You received a citizen's petition in May of this year and authorized staff to conduct a neighborhood study, which is the first and second step of the NCOD process. We reported back to you in August. At that meeting, you asked for a 90-day deferral to allow for the community to build consensus. In that 90 days, staff has attended multiple meetings with the community to work through some potential outcomes for the NCOD process. And yesterday morning, I received a notice from the original petitioners that they did not wish to proceed any longer with the NCOD process. So for your consideration today, you may choose to authorize the text change, which would be the third step in the process, or you may take no action ending the NCOD process for the Cameron Village neighborhood. The original petitioners are here if you have questions for them, as well as a neighborhood group that met who represented opposition to the request. And I'm also here to answer any questions for you.
So I move we take no action.
Do you think we should hear from the two groups?
Well, we can, but they've withdrawn the petition.
Yeah.
So
Oh, they
What's-
have
what's the
withdrawn.
they
point?
withdrew the petition for the NCOD.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
that's a motion.
Second.
Okay.
We'll just do nothing, and
Yeah,
we're good.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Manager.
Right.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. 5 items on the agenda. We'll try to keep that as quick as possible, and then I have 2 additional comments at the end, if you don't mind. The first is Capital Area Greenway Master Plan Steering Committee. This is similar to processes you've used in the past. The request is for you to approve the steering committee members. You may recall we briefed you on this particular topic and moving forward on September 3rd. We do have staff here that is available to answer any questions. The names and the backup and the description is in your packet. We don't have necessarily a presentation, but maybe questions. Otherwise, we await your direction.
I just appreciate all the work they did pulling the committee together. It looks like they've done a good job of representation.
Yeah, fine. I said I move to approve the committee members that were presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. The next item, I'm going to switch the order around a little bit. We're going to do the financial report first, which will become relevant when you see the item that follows that. As they're coming forward, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to the staff again for their hard work. This is our annual audit, financial audit, and so in front of you, you can see the actual we do still print these on paper some if you like. You will not be quizzed on the financial tables and audit materials that's inside, but if you would like to come for extra credit, you're always welcome. I do want to take a moment to recognize the high performance that the City of Raleigh has associated with our financial policies and our financial condition. We are both fortunate but work really hard to make sure that we support one of our organizational values, which is stewardship. So making sure that we are compliant with all the appropriate regulations, that we are good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, whether that's in fees or taxes, and that we make sure that we have sufficient reserves, not only in compliance with your policies, financial policies, but also to make sure that we are resilient in times where there might be a downturn. So although the material, no offense to our friends in finance, may be a little dry, I can certainly assure you that a good, solid financial condition is something that is really of high priority to us so that you don't have to worry about that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allison Bradsher and her team to do a few quick slides at a summary level of the report, of our comprehensive annual financial report.
All right, so good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today we will review the financial results for the year ending June 30th, 2019. So at your seats, each of you should have a CAFR, as the manager alluded to, and it's almost 200 pages, and a SAS 114 letter. The SAS 114 letter is a required communication directly from our external auditor, and in a nutshell explains the procedures performed and if there are any significant audit concerns. I'm pleased to say there are no issues related to the audit, and I will also add that there are several members of the management team from Cherry Beckard present today. So here's the agenda for today's presentation. I'll provide a quick reminder of the purpose and uses of the CAFR. Then I'll touch on a few ways the city focuses on fiscal stewardship. Shelley Boudreau, our chief accountant, will take you through the year-end results, moving from the big picture of the city as a whole to the fund level and closing with the FY19 general capital reserves. But first, I definitely want to thank this team that's pictured here. That's the one that pulls all this together. They are a small but mighty team who really hunker down and focus on this work effort. Of course, they don't accomplish this alone. Your guidance and support on fiscal matters, as well as the dedication of city management and departments on compliance, all contribute to a strong fiscal environment. So essentially, the CAFR contains the financial story of the city. It's really a snapshot of where we have been and includes year-end results and trends. Our external auditor, Cherry Beckard, provides an opinion on the fair representation of the results. We did receive a clean opinion this year, which provides support that the city accurately reported results and is transparent in its financial operations. In addition, the prior year CAFR received the Government Finance Officers Association Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And a special note, the city has received this award for 38 years, which is very impressive and speaks to our strong fiscal history. We plan on submitting this year's CAFR for the GFOA award. The CAFR serves as a communication tool. While the book seems to get longer and more complex each year, we use it as a basis for the condensed annual Citizens Financial Report, which we plan to publish next month. The annual Citizens Report is roughly 10 pages or so, and this year we will be highlighting the recent branding work completed by the city. So I'm very proud of the strong governance we have here in Raleigh. The city has a robust and strong internal control system, and you as city council and city management provide the proper tone at the top, which encourages compliance and promotes checks and balances. Continuing to achieve metrics is one indicator of our strong stewardship. I would like to commend city departments for a continued focus on expense management. The city has the highest credit rating, and maintaining a AAA rating speaks to our strong fiscal and operational performance. The city takes a proactive position with the funding of long-term obligations, and this action is viewed positively by our investor community. I hope this gives you just a summary view of several key areas which ensure the city's finances remain strong and support solid fiscal stewardship. It truly is a responsibility all of us share. I'll now turn it over to Shelley, who will take you through the year-end results.
Good afternoon. Let's see. So the city's government-wide net position is a consolidated snapshot of all of our city governmental and enterprise activities. The city's net position of $2.5 billion this year represents our investment in assets. The majority, as you would expect, is tied up in our capital assets, which is our equipment, buildings, and infrastructure that we use to provide services to our citizens. This comprised 70% in fiscal year 19. Unrestricted net position was 17% and was available to meet city's ongoing obligations and needs. The general fund is the city's main operating fund. 75% of the fund's primary revenue sources this year were derived from our property tax and sales tax collections. Public safety remained our main operation within the general fund, representing 48% of expenditures in fiscal year 19. Management continues to monitor the year-to-year growth of all these operations. In fiscal year 19, our revenues did exceed our expenditures, which resulted in a positive increase in our change in fund balance that met management's expectations for 19. The city does have several funds that operate like a business, with Raleigh Water being the largest, wherein our regional users directly pay for the water and sewer services. Revenues exceeded our budget, and strong management led to expenditure savings in fiscal year 19. The Raleigh Water team continues to utilize models for forecasting and long-term planning for the capital requirements needed to support the services. The city has 5 additional enterprises that also operate and are treated like a private business. Funding sources for these operations come primarily from user charges that are paid from those directly benefiting from these services. In addition, there are other funding sources such as our interlocal funding, external grants, as well as general fund support that is shown on the chart. To ensure the fiscal health of these operations, financial models are also used to plan for future needs. In fiscal year 19, these business operations met management's expectation, including the planned use of reserves that are noted on the chart. Displayed here is more of a snapshot of the city's debt portfolio at the end of our fiscal year 19. The city continues to maintain a AAA rating, which is from all three major credit rating agencies for our governmental and water sewer revenue bonds. This enables us to borrow at the lowest rates possible at the market. The city does have a healthy balance of debt to support governmental activities like the streets and parks, as well as the remaining in support of our capital needs for the business type activities that provide the direct services to our citizens. The city also does maintain funds that have more of a long-term planning focus. Unlike many of our other entities across the U.S. that operate on a pay-go model, the city is proud to be one that invests contributions each year to go ahead and those are based on our actuarial recommendations. That helps to gradually offset the long-term liabilities that are shown here. This funding practice is viewed very positively in the marketplace. In addition to the funds shown, the city also contributes to the state's pension plan at required funding levels each year. All of our funds are performing in line with expectation, and finance and city management will continue to proactively monitor these actuarial funds. So each year after the close of the CAFR, we get to present to you the general capital reserves that are calculated for the general fund. The city's internal policy is to maintain a minimum of 14% of next year's expenditure budget in the fund balance as a reserve. Amounts then over this threshold are available at council's discretion to either maintain as reserves or utilize for critical and non-recurring uses. The balance available this year for your consideration is $6.4 million. At this time, I just want to say thank you, and Alice and I are available for any questions that you may have for us.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you for the hard work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So the next item, which may have a connection to that last slide on the use of general capital reserves, is our recycling program. So I will ask Stan Joseph to come forward and get prepared. As he does that, just a couple of things for the community conversation. Recycling as a service is something that we as an organization and as a community value very much, not only from a point of recycling, but also from the standpoint of good business operations. And this is not a new topic for you because, as Mr. Joseph had indicated to you, not only in the budget but with an update, there are major disruptions in the market which he will repeat for the purposes of the public. I know you know this, but we thought it would be helpful to communicate that broadly. And so we are looking at some proposed changes to account for that disruption. So our request or recommendation to you today is to approve the amendment to the contract as well as use of $1.5 million from the general capital reserves to get us through this year, and then we're going to have to reset for next year. Now, one thing I would like to say before you begin the presentation on that use of the funding is that, as the policy indicates, use of general capital reserves is for critical non-recurring. This actually would be a recurring expense. Now, the reason we're proposing that exception is because we would have to deal with this on a more thoughtful basis as a part of the budget next year. So there is an intention to only use it once, which is really important when you start talking about use of savings for an operating expense. So I just want to make that very clear in terms of management expectation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Joseph for the presentation.
Madam Mayor, council members, always good to see you all. Like Ruffin said, I'm always sensitive to your time, but I do think it's important to maybe go back just a little bit and make a couple points for context that we discussed during our FY20 budget presentation. Kind of like when you're watching your favorite show and you get that 30-second snippet about last week's episode.
Appreciate it.
Not that I'm inferring that Talking Trash is your favorite show, but so I want to talk a little bit about what we talked about at the budget presentation, which is that what we've seen in the past probably 10 years with increased momentum is a deteriorating recycling systems throughout the country. It's not a national problem, it's a global problem, and there's a lot of factors involved with it. I think that the model that we built 20, 30 years ago, City of Raleigh's been recycling a long time, was not necessarily a sustainable model, but at that time, you know, the commodity markets for recycling was really good and people were making a lot of money, so we kind of settled into that comfort area and not really looked at the model long term. I want to talk a little bit about what we talked about last year with the decision that China made to start monitoring the recyclables that we take to them and that we export and sell over there. I think the majority of the recyclables that we have in the United States, probably a good 40% of it, has been going overseas, primarily to China. And so with this decision that China made to essentially say that the recyclables you're bringing to us is highly contaminated and we don't want that anymore, and put the restrictive quality assurances in places, affected the entire industry in the United States because we could no longer send it there. I don't want to make it seem that China is the only reason that the market is deteriorating. There are other factors, petroleum, the fact that we don't have a lot of domestic mills, that we rely a lot on the mills that are overseas, and there's other things that have affected it, but I do believe that China's decision was kind of the catalyst that started building momentum to where the market started deteriorating. I remember explaining the weighted average price to you last year, and that being essentially the factor that revolves around how the industry's been going. The weighted average price is what you can take a ton of the recyclables that we collect in the city of Raleigh to a processing facility and what we can sell it for, essentially. And again, back in 2010, 2011, you could sell a ton of single-stream recyclables for as much as $120, $125 per ton. As you can see here, the trend has been slowly deteriorating, and when I briefed you last, I think the weighted average price was about $40, $42 per ton. Since then, in 2019, it's continued to go down. I went too far with that. Okay, so let's just call it right here. So the average price per ton now for the weighted average price is $25 per ton. The dotted red line is an important line simply because that's typically what the average operating cost is for a processing facility in order to process 1 ton of recyclables. So when your operating cost is $70 a ton and you're selling for $25, that's not a very sustainable business model. Sunoco is our contractor, our processor. They've been with us for a long time. We've developed a great private-public partnership with them. And we are on our 3rd amendment, which was supposed to take our agreement to June 30, 2021. Under our current agreement, we're paying $1 per ton. So that's about $2,300 a month. I got to tell you that is the best deal in North Carolina right now, or at least it was. That is a sweetheart deal. I think that what processors have been realizing, if they haven't closed their doors already, is that they need to rethink the way their contracts are, and so they've been going out and talking to the folks that they have contracts with, explaining the situation, and kind of reworking the calculation for continued recycling. Our most recent developments, we've met several times with our partner Sunoco, and they have communicated to us the losses that they've been incurring to the tune of about $150,000 a month, which is pretty significant when we're paying them $2,300 a month. That's been going on for a while, and I think they got to the point where it's just obviously not sustainable, like many other processors in the area and the state and the country. So what we've been working with them is trying to restructure a deal that can become effective 1 January and go through June 30th of 2020 to make sure that we can continue recycling. And we've been successful in negotiating an amendment to do exactly that. I think the intent is that we take this 6-month extension to try to negotiate a longer processing contract with them for 3 years or 4 years, but we certainly need that time in order to figure out what the market is doing next and what we can work out and negotiate with the company in order to continue recycling in the city of Raleigh. Optimally, we would come to you in the FY21 budget and talk about what it would take in the way of recycling rates to continue recycling long term. Just for context, I wanted to list the situation some of the other towns are in here in the state and really in a lot of Wake County. As you can see, a lot of municipalities are in a different position from us. We do our own collection, but most of them contract privately to do their collection, in which case that's included in their rate. However, we deal directly with our processors. Just for example, Cary's paying about $110 per ton. Fuquay Varine is paying about $95 a ton. I think the lowest one right now is probably about $60 per ton. Our recommendation is, first of all, to approve the contract that we've negotiated for the Fourth Amendment with Sunoco. And our second recommendation is to use the funding from our general fund capital reserves rather than a mid-year adjustment to fund the 6-month extension so we can negotiate a longer-term contract. I think there's always the option for you to increase recycling fees to cover those costs, but it is staff's recommendation at this time to use $1.5 million from the general fund to fund that 6-month extension. And again, the optimum intent is to come back in FY21 budget and talk about the long-term plan for recycling and continued recycling services. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
I have a question. As far as negotiating an extension, are we also looking at, because I saw in the presentation other companies that other municipalities have contracted with, is there any conversation of an RFP and looking at that going forward?
Yeah, so I think that we have looked in the state. There's about 19 processing facilities, and really in our area, there's only one right now. Well, there's actually two: Waste Management Incorporated and Sunoco Recycling. Waste Management current facility is at capacity, so you know they can't really take much more volume. Certainly not the level of volume that we bring. The other option is to look at some other processing facilities that are in the state, but distance is obviously a problem because now you associate the traveling and taking our recyclables to them. At the end of the day, right now, the most feasible option is to continue our relationship with Sunoco.
Okay.
In the world of recycling, do we just see the model completely changing to the point where municipalities will have to decide how they absorb the cost or how that cost is passed on to the consumer?
I think in the near future, yes, because but the market is still evolving. Again, this is kind of the new norm. There's a lot of things that are going on in response to what has happened in China. For example, there are more mills that are being brought here and being purchased by China, so they can actually do the processing here and ship it back to them at a lower cost, which will now all the supply that we have in the United States will actually have a place to go because they can control their own destiny as the way of contamination. So I would say in the immediate future, I think there are some tough decisions to make, but I do think I'm optimistic that this is an opportunity to build the recycling model the way it should have been built a long time ago.
Thank you, Stan.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the 1.5 for an extended contract with negotiation with Sunoco.
It's going to be for an amendment for a 6-month extension.
Yes, an amendment for a 6-month extension.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Next item is just a brief presentation of a video associated with the Raleigh Youth Summit. Chief Deck Brown is here from the Raleigh Police Department. We presented some information about this to you in a previous meeting, but we did want to share with you a video that is going to be presented in the public as another illustration of communicating our commitment to young people in our community. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Deck Brown.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to come back and present this very short video. Before I go into that, I was here 2 weeks ago talking about the eye care initiative that we were launching, and this morning we had launched that with our faith leaders, and we had a significant turnout for that. So I'm really excited about what 2020 will bring in that partnership and endeavor with our very diverse faith community that was present this morning. The Raleigh Police Department held the inaugural Youth Summit on September 28th of this year at the McKimmon Center. And I think we were all taken away by the experience alone, as well as the youth who were there. It was a long day for all of us, and it was a day-long event that started about 6:30, and I think the video covers, it ended right about 6. We shut everything down at 6 o'clock, and parents came to pick up those that weren't able to drive themselves home. But it was a really huge event for us, and these were kids who had come from across the entire county. So I want to say thank you to you all for your support, but also for your sponsorship in that regard as well. We're very grateful. So early morning, late evening, or late afternoon, and we ended it with a day celebration party, if you will, dance party for the young folk, just really in order to celebrate their triumphs over the day. Several of our presenters stayed and hung out with the kids, and they also got to see a much lighter side of our officers as well, who were on the dance floor with them throughout the event, as well as our assistant city manager. She too can shake a leg. One thing I just want to say really quick is I think the connection and some of the bigger takeaways from that event was just really an opportunity to showcase our youth and allow them to see themselves as future leaders in our community, and to show that they too have a voice. And they really came with a tremendous voice, whether they were sitting on panels or in the audience throughout that event. That, I think, we made strides in that regard, and hopefully we will go forward in the future with more than 300 kids. Saw your expression, 300, and the just the relationship that they built with themselves and the networking that many of us experience when we go away to a conference was phenomenal to see. And the respect that they showed for each other, but the mutual respect that came from that space between youth and officers and other city personnel. We didn't pull this off without a number of other departments assisting as well. So without further ado, I will say that our video does add quite a bit of flavor. There's nothing dry about this. It has truly been a labor of love. The intentional focus today really is all about you.
You all are making a bit of history today because this is the first annual Raleigh Police Department Youth Summit.
This is not like an America that we think about, right? America being the melting pot that it is.
When there's a breakdown of mutual respect, what intends to happen?
Because if you want to be successful, you're going to have to do something you don't want to do every day, I'm telling you.
It's harder because, like, they're going to make you laugh. Right. In front of everybody else.
But everybody here can work hard, all right?
Transform from being a product of your environment to being a product of your mindset.
I know you've used your voice. You have a voice. It doesn't mean you all have to agree on things. This is part of the problem. You start with finding your own voice, and then you find your people.
Every great person ever, all the greats have had mentors. Every billionaire, millionaire, and successful person in this entire world has stood on the shoulders of some giants.
He's also really good at searching buildings. He can jump up and climb over stuff.
Got a drive camera down here.
We're here to help. That's what we primarily do.
We have a 32-inch TCL Simply Smart TV. 29755. That's the last of the gift, so keep dancing until we shut it down at 6. So enjoy your last few minutes. Those young folk could have gone on for about another 4 or 5 hours. I think we had peaked out by 6 o'clock, to say the least. There were a lot of takeaways from that. Obviously, a lot of motivation, a lot of nuggets that they can use in life, a lot of conversations with the individuals, some faces I'm sure you knew, and really just a way to see themselves as vibrant young people who have the ability to give back to the community and be productive in doing that. There were a lot of tangible takeaways, as you saw. One was the TV that someone received. But one of our keynotes, Sean Blanchard, actually identified a kid in that audience who left with actually being measured. This young person will receive a tailored suit. Several of our presenters were authors and artists. Young folk left with autographed books and other documents, ties, just you name it. There were a lot of tangible takeaways in addition to the swag bag that we provided each of the young folk with. So I truly hope that this is the beginning of the next event for us. Our desired outcomes were, and we're still working through them. One is to build the advisory committee. We created and began the start of job skill development. Being able to allocate personnel to pay attention and make sure that we're connecting the young folk to service providers that are specific to their needs. This was an opportunity for us to tell a story, but what we also saw was young folk have a significant and very powerful story to tell as well. We were able to communicate, and I think this is a long-term effort to continue to communicate the city services and programs that we provide for our young people. It's amazing when you put that number of folk in a space and you realize there are folk who really don't have any ideas to the various services and programs that a city this size provides to young people, from employment to just programs that are scattered throughout many of our different departments. And so in closing, I believe that we have met some of our desired outcomes. We still have some long-term planning to do to continue to meet that goal and to raise these young folk up, but we are well on our way. So it is my hope that we will be working very hard and diligently towards the 2020 Youth Summit. Because I think we rocked it, as several kids see it. Doesn't sound all that great coming from me, but when they say it, I think we rocked. So
You did.
thank you.
Thank you,
did.
Chief.
It was.
Any questions?
I was fortunate to just spend a little time. Didn't make it to the dance party, but I just want to take a second to thank you for everything that you do. You're an incredible chief. It's been my honor to be able to work with you. We're very, very fortunate in the city of Raleigh to have you, as we are all of your officers. I just want to take a second to thank all of them. They have a very, very difficult job, and you guys do Raleigh proud every day. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. One additional highlight. Next item is a Washington Terrace update. Larry Jarvis is going to come forward to introduce our guests. As he's coming forward, just an acknowledgement that affordable housing is certainly a policy topic of great importance, but that's something that requires a lot of partnership and collaboration with other folks in our community. And so the Washington Terrace project is one that really represents a collaboration among multiple agencies, including the City of Raleigh, with significant financial contributions. So Larry Jarvis is here to share some of the storytelling associated with the success of that project. So, Mr. Jarvis.
Thank you, Ruffin. Yes, we're here to kind of talk about first and last events. And again, it was important to Greg to be here to thank this council for their support of this project, and just to kind of remind council of a couple of things, that Washington Terrace is a part of the neighborhood revitalization strategy area plan that this body approved that includes East College Park. It's also important to keep in mind that this was the first project that was funded after council approved the Affordable Housing Improvement Plan and made the decision to fund that with the 1 cent on the tax rate. So the Village of Washington Terrace, which we're going to celebrate today, again, the first project funded with that funding source. In addition to this being the last time this body will meet, this will be the last time that Greg Warren will have the opportunity to stand before City Council this City Council as Executive Director. After a few years, Greg has made the decision to retire. I think he is going to take that plunge in March. Yes. But he certainly has made an incredible contribution to this community. And I think that will resonate with you as you watch the video that I'm going to now let him introduce. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, and thanks, Mayor and members of council. Good to see you. Just last month, Mayor McFarland and Councilor Stevenson had the opportunity to attend our dedication event, and thank you for that. And I just wanted to take you back. It was 5 years ago that I appeared before council, and we said that we've heard that this Washington Terrace development is on the open market. It looks like it's being promoted as a great play for gentrification and the like. And I came before you and said, we really need to do this together. And City Council stepped up. Mayor, we didn't have a lot of time to deliberate, and I went back and looked at the minutes, and you asked some very tough questions about our plans, because we didn't have detailed plans back then. But after about a 2-year civic engagement process with over 350 interviews, multiple meetings, Corey, I know you've attended a number of those, and Russ did too, we came up with a plan, a master plan for Washington Terrace that really guided our work. And there are a couple of key principles in that master plan. One is that we're going to redevelop Washington Terrace without displacing the current residents. 2 is that our first priority would be to develop on a replacement housing, rental housing, for the existing tenants on a 1-to-1 basis. There were 246 existing apartments there, and we want to do our best to replace on a first priority basis those existing apartments. So fast forward now, back in about 2 years ago, we held our groundbreaking. And just in October, we had our dedication. And out of that, we now have 162 apartments for families. That's an $8.6 million commitment of city funds, $32 million total. We have Booker Park North, which provides 72 apartments for seniors. That was a $2.2 million commitment from the city, $12 million project overall. So we have $44 million worth of work underway that we've completed. Yet we have another 12 to 13 acres still to develop, and our initial plan was really to do a mixed income community, both affordable rental as well as home ownership opportunities for moderate income folks, and maybe even some market rate rentals. So that's next on DHIC's platform to figure out. I'm helping to guide that for a little bit, but I'll step away from that. But I think another important part of this whole development was that we heard from the residents saying that one of their priorities was that they needed affordable childcare. There really was a lack of that. And we are so fortunate to partner with the Methodist Home for Children to be able to deliver on that promise. They have a 75-seat beautiful facility that we built for them. They're renting it from us. That'll be offering infant to pre-K services for the neighborhood residents. So again, I just want to thank you very much. I think we've put a permanent stake in the ground for affordable housing in that neighborhood. It'll remain affordable under DHIC's stewardship, and we're really pleased to have that partnership with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Yvette Holmes, who will cue up this video that we're going to watch.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Pro Tem and other council members. I certainly echo the sentiments shared by Greg. We started this journey some 5 years ago with a simply stated goal to preserve housing, affordability, and to improve the quality of living for residents of Washington Terrace. Though the plan was not evident to us at the time, we knew that we could not do this work alone, and that engaging residents, neighbors, key stakeholders in the community at large would be the key to our success. Success is why we're here today. Some said it couldn't be done, but here we are some 5 years later, 92 original households or 148 residents still call Washington Terrace home today. Success, that really matters. We thought it'd be important to document the success of our collective efforts at this moment in time. And we'd like to share a short video that features 3 original Washington Terrace residents. They have since moved into the new community, and in the video, they reflect on their journey and experiences throughout the process. Please note that this video does not tell the full and complete story of Washington Terrace. We are currently working to create additional chapter videos, as I like to call it, to more fully document the history of Washington Terrace and the master planning and development phases of the project. So at this time, I would like to cue up the video. Thank you.
Well, this community means a lot to me. People's been here 30 years, you know? Back in those days, anybody that was anybody, they had a lot of prominent people come out of Washington Terrace.
For my son growing up here, it's already been a good experience for him. And so then now we're taking pictures. Then we can show him later, this is where you rode your bike. When you see that scrape on your knee, this is the bush you fell into, or those kind of things.
DHIC bought the property, so when they came in, they started having meetings.
When a new company or anybody comes into an existing space, trust is essential.
The very first thing they said to us, they said, well, you could stay. You do not have to move because we want to take care of you guys.
I don't remember them having one meeting that didn't mean something. They kept us informed throughout the whole thing.
When I first moved in my townhome, I felt relief. I felt a sense of joy because of the way the place looked and because of the way I felt when I walked through the front door. I feel safer here. There's more room. I love sitting at my kitchen table. I'm able to look out the window and meditate.
There are children playing. You know your neighbors. You feel like you're in a community rather than being in a place where just people are.
Well, I get out to the garden maybe once a week and look at everything to make sure everything's in place. I think the idea came along when we were supposed to give the kids something to work for, you know?
The daycare here is a tremendous advantage. One, because it's in the neighborhood. It's not, oh, I have to get up earlier to go out of my way to drop him off. It's almost across the street.
The people that comes in now, they think all they see is a pretty building, but they don't know how long the old timers like myself have waited for it to get to this point, you know.
Everything that they said in the meeting in reference to tearing down and building up the community, they did exactly what they said.
They do so much. I mean, they're like one of the greatest organizations that's ever been over here. I mean, they do it all.
It's very important for people who have low income. It's very important for people like me.
Coming home to the new place after deployment, it was refreshing to know that after having been through all of that there was a place called home.
As I'd be lying if I told you that I'm not satisfied. I'm satisfied with everything here. Everything's great.
We'd like to thank you on behalf of the DHIC board and staff for all of your support, and we look forward to, I hope you got tears in your eyes. I don't know if you do, I do. Every time I watch it, it warms my heart. And it really took a lot of work on behalf of the community at large to make this possible. And so I can foresee more opportunities like this in the future, so thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, and Greg, thank you for your years of partnership with this city. Obviously, this is nothing that we could do alone, but we really appreciate everything we've done with DHIC. And
well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Incredible achievement. I also want to take a minute to thank Larry for all the amazing work you've done. I'm really happy to see the video. I hope it gets pushed out everywhere, because I don't think we do a great job of telling the story of the great things we've done. You've brought your skills and knowledge to this department, and we've produced more affordable units than ever before. So I just want you to know how much I've valued your service, and thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Mayor and Council, just a couple of final comments. And I know today's running a little bit long. Just two things I wanted to say. First, Thanksgiving holiday is next week, and then we go into the holiday season. I did just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of the employees and the staff of the City of Raleigh who work so hard each and every day, but particularly during the holiday season. There's lots of activities, there's lots of services to help people that are going through Thanksgiving or going through the various holidays. And the city doesn't stop, so we continue to provide services that we need to provide even during those holidays. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all those folks that work so hard over the holiday season. It matters a lot to me personally. The second and the final thing is I just want to take a moment to say thank you to this mayor and council. I know that you will have some additional comments later, but I'd like to use my time to just say thank you. It's really been a privilege and a wonderful opportunity to work with all of you with this particular group over the last 2 years. For several of you, more than 2 years. I don't think that most citizens really appreciate how difficult it is, the job that you have to do. There's lots and lots of long hours and a real commitment to this community for each and every one of you. And there's a lot of sacrifice there that I'm get a chance to see that most folks don't. I just know that each and every one of you care deeply about this community and about this organization, and I feel very fortunate to have had an opportunity to work with all of you, regardless of whatever path that we take. And so thank you for the opportunity to continue to serve as the city manager with this particular group. I appreciate the time we've spent together. So thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're now going to move on to the report and recommendation. We have multiple commission reports. I'll just say you're welcome to do the presentation, or you're welcome to just let us ask questions, because we have all the presentations in our backup. So we will start with the Raleigh Arts Commission.
To Nancy McFarland, our mayor, to Mr. Corey Branch, our mayor pro tem, and to our arts liaison, Ms. Kay Crowder. Good afternoon. To the members of the council, to the staff, and to the citizens, good afternoon again. I am Shonda Branch, the chair of the City of Raleigh Arts Commission, and I come to you with our annual work plan and a report of last fiscal year's activities. Let me begin by saying thank you. I am very, very grateful for a supportive council. The commission recognizes that you all have been very, very kind to us. You have encouraged and supported all of the things that we have done, and we appreciate that. Am I in slide 1 or slide 2? Okay. We have worked with the Public Art and Design Board to implement the community plan, which is the Raleigh Arts Plan. We want to thank you for supporting that plan and ensuring that all Raleigh citizens have access to creativity. There's a report of last year's accomplishments in your packet, but I did want to highlight a few items. There were 86 temporary public art and creative placemaking projects in fiscal year 19, which employed 150 artists. There were 18 citizen-initiated projects proposed and installed on city property, and that number is up from 4 in the previous fiscal year. Our pop-up studios reached 2,181 people through 335 programs in 8 different community centers. So now we move into our fiscal year 2020 work plan, and we're pleased to announce that the first 11 creative bus shelters have been wrapped and installed across the city. They were funded by Together Raleigh, which is a group of city leaders, which includes our very own mayor. The commission is also excited to help to welcome the 2020 Leadership Exchange in Arts and Disability Conference to the City of Raleigh in August of 2020. We've launched a 4-tier program to fund and support local artists and arts groups as they create accessible arts events for the LEAD conference and for their participants to attend. Now, this is a key accomplishment in one of our goals, which is to be a national leader in arts and accessibility. We've made great strides toward that over the years, and now we've landed a national conference where folks will be coming here to learn and celebrate in the city of Raleigh. We're also excited about Seek Raleigh going to new parks. We'll be getting our first neighborhood arts fund applications, and we're excited about the Creative Aging Program, which turns an eye to the creative lives of our senior citizens. We hope that you will approve our work plan as it is proposed so that we can continue to do the work of getting art to everyone in the city. And at this point, I would like to introduce Scott Hazard, who is the chair of the Public Art and Design Board.
Thanks very much. That's loud. Thanks very much, Shonda. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I just want to reiterate Shonda's previous remarks about giving appreciation and thanks to Mayor McFarland for your leadership in creating Raleigh's first public art program in Raleigh in 2009. It's come a long way since then. We're really excited about where it's been and where it's going, and also want to thank council for their continued support of the growing public art in the city of Raleigh. As you know, the ordinance City Council passed in 2009 allocated, I should go to the next slide. Is that me controlling this or?
I don't know.
Okay, I can keep going. We're fine. We're fine with this slide. Thank you. As you know, the ordinance City Council passed in 2009 allocated 0.5% of construction funds for municipal projects for public art and initiated the development of the Public Art and Design Board, which I'm proud to serve on. We're grateful for the continued support from City Council over the past 10 years and are still excited about the increase in public art funding to 1% of project construction costs that Council passed in 2016. This had a great impact on the work we do, and we're excited to see everything move forward. Thanks also for the support of Council and thanks to the support of Council and the hard work of current former members of the PADB who served the past 10 years, the Arts Commission, the Office of Raleigh Arts team, and many others. We're at a great place with our public art program and look forward to continue the important work on growing and refining the process for the city's public art projects. If we can do next slide. Thank you, perfect. In 2012, the first percent for public artwork was completed. Since then, 11% for public artworks have been completed. The Public Art and Design Board is currently managing 10 active percent for public art projects, and there are allocated funds for 12 additional projects in the pipeline this year. The board's excited about some projects that are close to completion, a couple of which are on this screen right here. The Duke Energy Center for Performing Arts, Sonark by Brian Brush, will be installed by the end of the year. It's a great example of a public and private partnership to realize a project. That's the image right in the middle you may be familiar with. Raleigh's first Greenway Tunnel artwork is underway. It includes painting and new lighting and will be completed at the beginning of 2020. That's the Rocky Branch Trail right downtown. The Moore Square Park is another example. That's the image right on top middle. It's an example of a project where the artist selected was integrated very early on into the design process, giving a lot of chance to bounce ideas back and forth and really fuse the art and the landscape design together. And last but not least, the canopy at Union Station is currently in the redesign phase after a hiatus and has an anticipated installation of late 2020 or early 2021. Could you do next slide, please? Great, that's perfect. The last couple of slides, I know you've seen these maps before, but we just want to reiterate how important your support has been on the growth of the public art program in the city of Raleigh over the past 10 years. This map you see here maps the public art within the city of Raleigh from between 1980 and 2008. The red, they actually had no percent for art programs that started in 2009, but the icons, the items you see that represent acquisition items that took place before then. There's one temporary art project in the eastern part of the city. If you fast forward to the next slide, you see a lot more dots. The red dots are permanent art projects that have been installed in the past 10 years. The orange dots are temporary art installations that have been up for a shorter period of time. But you can see dramatically the growth that's taking place there. And one of the things that Public Art and Design Board works on actively is to make sure that any new projects that do come online are equitably distributed throughout the region. So there's some geographic balance between our projects throughout the city, and things are located in the right places and represent all that we want them to be. And with that, that's the end of our quick talk. I just want to see if you have any questions, and also recommend that you please approve the work plans for PDB and CORAC. Thanks very much.
Okay. Any questions?
Motion to approve.
That's the Arts
both.
Commission and the Public Art and Design Board?
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, next we have report recommendation of the Substance Use Advisory Commission.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Marquita Mbonu, and I'm the staff liaison to the Substance Use Advisory Council. The chairperson, Elliot Palmer, was here earlier, but he had to leave, unfortunately. So I wanted to, you all have the packet, within your packets, you have the work plan for your review. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to take that back to the chair and get back with you all. But they would like for you all to approve the work plan.
Motion
to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have report and recommendation of the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities.
Oh, this Eric. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I appreciate having the opportunity to come to speak to you briefly today regarding the Mayor's Committee. As you know, the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities work to promote the integration of people with disabilities into community life. And my purpose here is to highlight some of our activities for the fiscal year ending in 2019 and to present the recommendations for our next fiscal year. Our first major activity was our Employer Resource Day. We had 62 individuals who came from the public and private sector, from human resources, to learn about issues related to hiring individuals with disabilities. For this year, our topic was related to recruiting persons with disabilities into the workforce. And at this event, we typically present our scholarships to our students who are at the university. This year, we presented the James E. Benton Scholarship Award to 2 individuals who are attending NC State University. Go Wolfpack.
Yes, sir.
The first, Mahalia Gamble and Mr. Ahmad Fatih. These individuals both are very active at the university, and the young lady is wanting to major in life sciences, where she wants to eventually become a conservation educator. And Mr. Fatih is getting a major in engineering. He wants to become employed in the technology field, and he hopes to get a PhD at some point. So that was great to have those young people there to receive our awards. Our next event is our awards banquet, where we recognize individuals and businesses who have had a positive impact on persons with disabilities. This year we had 119 participants at this event. I just will run down just a few of our awards because you all have the packet there, and I'm sure all of you have thoroughly reviewed all of this information. We had the Lockhart Folly Mace Advocacy Award. It was awarded to Mr. James Benton posthumously, who had served for many years as the chair of the committee, and he was a strong advocate for persons with disabilities all over our city. Secondly, we awarded our Employee of the Year Award to a large organization that was NC State University, which has employed individuals in its hospitality services on the campus. Our next award we gave to, it was Excellence in Education. It was given to Wake Tech for its ABE TOPS program for students with intellectual disabilities. And our final award that I want to mention is Excellence in Transportation. It was given to Alliance for Disability Advocates, who have a training program to assist persons with disabilities in navigating both fixed route and paratransportation service. And the final activity I wanted to comment about, it is related to transportation, where our committee, along with the transportation staff, worked together to establish our on-street accessible parking spots. There were 16 slots that were established, and we got a utilization report back in May, and I think we had a 70% utilization rate, and that's great. And we certainly will continue to work with staff to expand these opportunities or slots across the city. And I wanted to conclude with the recommendations that we have presented for next fiscal year. For years, you, the council, have provided support for 2 scholarships for undergraduate students in the amount of $1,000 each. We're asking that this be increased to $2,000 per scholarship because of the ever-increasing cost of higher education. Secondly, we are asking to add scholarships for graduate students. As we know, it is increasingly required that individuals have master's degrees to pursue just entry-level fields. So we would like to expand this opportunity to graduate students. Thirdly, our recommendation is that council will work to establish a management fellow program for persons with disabilities. We have a similar program here in the city, but we would like to see something formally established for persons with disabilities. Fourthly, we are hoping to add at least every other month evening meetings for our committee because we want to become more available to people who can come to our committee meetings in the evenings. And finally, we wish to ask council to direct staff to evaluate the audible street crossing policies with a goal to have comprehensive audible street crossings in our city. So those are my recommendations. I'm available for any questions, if there are any.
I'd just like to thank you for all the work you've done. It's certainly a detailed report, and I appreciate everything that you've done. I think what I'd like to do, suggest that we accept the report and maybe refer it to staff for consideration because it includes some funding. I'm not sure if that would become a budget note through the budget process or whether that is a grant application through HRC, but if staff could.
We'll look at it and let you know.
And they'll get back and figure out which process is the best for those things.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate all your work that you do.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay, next we have the report and recommendation of the Human Relations Commission.
Mayor, were you going to vote to accept that report?
Oh, you wanted to vote to accept it?
Well, just like any other report. You don't have to. We can take the referral and budget, but are you going to accept their report?
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we accept the Mayor on Disabilities work plan for 20.
Okay.
Does that,
We're not.
with those recommendations, Madam Clerk?
We're not
can you-
approving the recommendations.
You're
That's what I'm saying.
accepting the, yeah, but there's
Accepting
other,
the
I'm sorry,
report.
there's other
Yeah,
things
not
in the
approving.
work.
Okay.
To administration.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Good afternoon, Mayor, Honorable City Council. It's nice to see you all this afternoon. Chris Mutos on behalf of the City of Raleigh Human Relations Commission. I know that you have the work plan before you, and I don't need to really reiterate all of the information that is in there. I would like to just make a comment that we are very excited that last year we commenced on the creation of the Human Relations Department, which is being spearheaded by Dr. Audrey Caesar. And we spent a lot of last year transitioning from a full volunteer board into a board that is supporting the city department. And we have been asking for this position for many years, as you are well aware, and very excited to have it. I feel like there are good things that will come from it. And aside from what we did do last year, looking forward to the information that you see in the 2019-2020 work plan for the Human Relations Commission, focusing on racial equity, unity, cultural celebration, and LGBT inclusion. and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just a comment?
Yeah.
This is a very ambitious plan.
Yes, it is.
And I want to make sure that you all coordinate as much as you can with staff and current nonprofits that exist as to avoid any kind of duplication in efforts. But
Yes, there would be a lot, especially with the first category for racial equity.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
That's that's everywhere across the board right now, so.
That's right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Understood completely.
Is that a motion to accept the report? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very
On
much.
behalf of the commission and personally, I want to thank each and every one of
Oh,
you for
thank
all of your
you.
service. You all have done a tremendous job for this city and for the residents.
Thank you
So
very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, now we're going to move on to requests and petitions of citizens. Remind everyone we ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and address for the clerk when you begin. So first we have Greg Hayden.
Mayor, councilors, Greg Hayden, 511 East Jones Street, Raleigh. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for all you've done for the city and all the help you've given us through the years to continue working to preserve so many parts of Raleigh. And the project we're going to talk about today, I just want to give an update on a project that we had before council, I think in 2012. With the corridor plan, and we talked about Raleigh Bonded Warehouse, and we have worked through some site issues on this. Raleigh Bonded Warehouse is in the National Historic Register. It's a 10-acre site, over 100,000 square feet of building, and it's something that we want to change into more of a mixed-use retail office, liven it up. Unlike a lot of our other projects, there's actually more site than there is building on this, so it gives us a lot of opportunity to bring some life in it. Back when I started working with y'all, we had stone tablets, so if I make a mistake here, forgive me. There we go. All right, so this is the site from an aerial looking back towards downtown. You'll see about the first third of those buildings with the beautiful new white roofs is what we're talking about. That's the 10 acres, and it comes north. Pigeon House branch is there, and that is going to be part of what we're going to do with the site work. This is tricky. This is the site plan. To the top left is the actual building. There's another building across from it with some parking. There's a proposed new building pretty much in the middle of the site, and we're going to work on creating a corridor there. First thing is the Pigeon House branch. We want to restore that. So we're going to work with the city and the state to do what is ever necessary to bring that back. We realize now it's fairly polluted. You know, we hope over time that will be cleaned up and somewhat accessible, but even until then, we want to make it something that the site connects to just as a visual amenity. If you look at this towards the bottom in the yellow, you'll see a service road that connects to the site. It actually dead ends into the site, and we've had a number of conversations with Eric Lamb and Transportation about the possibility that that will turn into a West Street extension. Our goal here is in anticipation of that to create some type of traffic movement through the site, and you'll see that in a heavier yellow where it comes into the site, and it either is the terminal point for West Street, or I'll speak faster, or is a kind of a capillary area where it kind of blends through to some connector on the other side. This is a greenway that we're talking about building in anticipation of hopefully having a city greenway. This will be one that's built by us, so if the city comes in with a greenway, there'll be a connector point into that. This is outdoor space that you know, we want to do to liven the space and even bring people towards the creek and have some outdoor events there for the entirety of the community.
Greg,
Yes.
You've gone over your 3 minutes.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to do that. And I just want to say, if you have any questions.
Okay.
Okay. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I'm even happier to step down.
I just have one question.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
any of the stream, Pigeon Forge stream daylighted, or is it all underground currently?
In front of this, it's daylighted.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank
All
you
right,
so much.
Thanks. Okay, next we have Evan Pushchak. There you are.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to address you this afternoon. My address is 2108 Blue Oak Terrace. I'm here to discuss our noise ordinance, and I'm hoping you can help with a recurrent noise issue that I experience at my house due to thumping bass noise coming from the Enigma nightclub, which is at 600 Creekside Drive. I would not be here wasting everybody's time if this was a singular issue affecting only me, as I have heard directly from at least 30 other people that this noise is significantly impacting them as well. I live about 3/4 of a mile away from this nightclub, and every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday for the past several months, I've been able to hear their thumping bass line that goes until 2 in the morning. I've called 911 over 10 times in the past several months and have brought this matter to the attention of the Raleigh Police Department. I would like to thank Captain Quick and his team for their incredible help with this issue. Unfortunately, after the police tried to work with the nightclub to adjust the frequencies of their equipment, the noise, while improved, persists. 3 separate Raleigh police officers have been in my house in the middle of the night and have directly heard this noise themselves. On the weekend of October 19th, the Raleigh Police Department code enforcement team went to the nightclub to take measurements of the sounds. Out of 10 measurements, only 1 violated the noise ordinance decibel limit, so citations were not issued. You might be wondering, how is it possible that noises that can travel over 3/4 of a mile fail to violate our noise ordinance? That is why I'm talking to you today, because the noise ordinance, as it stands, does not adequately address bass or low-frequency noises that come from nightclubs, which vibrate structures at great distances, sending sounds through walls of houses. I'm asking you to consider changes to the noise ordinance that can mitigate this special type of noise pollution. Specifically, our noise ordinance operates on A weighting of decibel measurements, which is known to drastically underestimate the actual power of low-frequency noises. Thus, the scale we use is inaccurate. C weighting is the most accurate for this range of noise and is recommended by the World Health Organization as the proper measurement tool. Medical studies also demonstrate that people can be woken up with decibels, sounds as low as 30 decibels, and the cutoff for after 11 p.m. noise on our ordinance is 55. Lastly, the first 8 or 9 times I called the police department about the noise disturbance, 0 decibel measurements were taken, as nobody on duty who had the qualification to use the sound meter was available. So in effect, we are asking our police officers to enforce a law that inaccurately measures noises at a limit that is too loud in the middle of the night using equipment that only a few people have been trained to use. I reject the notion that hearing thumping bass line until 2 in the morning from a nightclub that is 3/4 away from my house is a part of city living. So I ask that the council consider changing the ordinance, considering changes that maybe after 11 p.m. a lower decibel measurement could be found, that C weighting can be used, and consider adding a provision requiring repeatedly offending businesses to adequately soundproof their buildings so that their patrons can have a good time and that I can also enjoy my property.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, this is a problem that I've heard about from, not just from this club, but from other clubs, and it seems to be there isn't an easy solution to it. Officers come out and monitor things, but I do think it would be helpful if staff could look into some of these other suggestions that have been made to see if we can try to come up with something that works a little bit better for our community.
Maybe a broader approach.
We can certainly do that. I also need to kind of look at the city attorney. If you're talking about making changes to the noise ordinance itself, I think that's a joint question in terms of what that threshold, I'm not going to be getting to your business, so maybe.
We're glad to look at it. There's a lot of different ways that a lot of different cities do it, and we're glad to look into it and come back with some options. I'll probably involve our police attorney Ashby with that, so
right.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Very much. Okay, next we have Perry Woods.
Perry Woods, 3237 Glen Ridge Drive.
Madam Mayor, this is a 3-minute speech, but I might get choked up in about a little bit, and so please forgive and indulge me. It is often said that elections have consequences. Unfortunately, we're getting hard lessons in that principle right now on both a federal and state level. That said, 18 years ago, with the election of Charles Meeker as our mayor and a close and hard-fought election right after 9/11, with the clear cutting of trees being a prominent issue, no surprise our citizens are emotional about trees, Raleigh changed directions, going from a vision of what a city we can't be to what a city we can be. A welcoming, diverse, world-class city that retains its hometown roots with an inspirational future. Since then, we have seen unprecedented growth and prosperity, done mostly in a thoughtful and planned way. You have risen above the toxic, tribal, partisan politics that are crippling our state and nation currently, always putting the city and its citizens first. That alone is something to be proud of. Sometimes it took a while to get there, but you've always listened and came up with the right answers. But there's so much more. Along the way, you've opened Fayetteville Street and built a new convention center and amphitheater, which by any measure has been a great success. Pulled off hosting an NHL All-Star game and celebrated a Stanley Cup, built the infrastructure the city has needed to handle growth, including roads, fire stations, satellite police offices to improve public safety, a new Union Station that is the envy of the Southeast. We've attracted literally billions of dollars of private investment and many high-paying jobs. You've elevated the arts to a point of being an economic driver, making us a destination city and drawing events like the IBMA. You've established a consistent funding source for affordable housing, worked with community groups and ministries to establish the Oak City Center and the Oak City Cares to address homelessness. You started a new stormwater utility. You increased curbside recycling, created a street trees program, purchased watershed conservation buffers to protect our drinking water. A leader in sustainability and LEED certified facilities, added many new and exciting parks, including over 100 miles of greenway, and acquired a jewel in Diggs Park that will be a heart of our city for generations to come. And Madam Mayor, few will know what you done for this city in managing our relationships with the General Assembly, all while keeping taxes low and managing our utility enterprises and budget, so both have retained their rare AAA bond ratings, resulting in among the lowest costs of services in the state, with no corruption, I might add. You, along with our citizens, have made Raleigh the best place to live, work, learn, and play in America. No small accomplishment. It's been the privilege of my life to have been associated with you. Over this time, Charles Meeker, 18 years ago, actually 28 years ago, it took him 3 times to win the mayor's seat. Madam Mayor, you for 12. Kay for much of this time as well. Russ, for you 14 years. Dickie, you the last 4. Stephanie, unfortunately, I have not had the opportunity to work for you, but I perhaps hope to be able to do so in the future. And now how hard this can be on you, and more importantly, how hard it can be on your families, often with little thanks, and certainly no, not for the money. I can attest to that. So I'm here today simply to say thank you. Thank you for your diligent, earnest, and professional service. Thank you for your hundreds of hours you have sacrificed away from your friends and family. And to say thank you to your families for sharing you with us as well. The city's better off for it. Yes, elections have consequences. It has been a remarkable, stable, and successful 18-year run, but all good things must come to an end, and our city has now been entrusted to a new generation of leadership who must tackle and find solutions to the many challenges our success has created, housing affordability, transportation, and equity among them. I'm excited to see where they take us. If they follow your lead and paying it forward and always remembering how your decisions impact future generations, we'll be in good shape. Once again, thank you, good luck, Godspeed, and please feel proud of a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do have personalized copies I would like to share with the departing members.
Thank you very much.
They're in order.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then next we have Zainab Baloch. Is Zainab here? I haven't seen her. Okay. So we'll move on to matters scheduled for public hearing. First is our public nuisance abatement property liens. I'll read the address. If you're here for the hearing, please indicate so, and our Mayor Pro Tem will look out for you. We'll open the hearing. 7113 Battle Bridge Road. What?
Mayor, is that the one that was withdrawn? I'm sorry.
701.
Oh, I'm sorry, 701 is the one that's been paid, 701 Battle Drive, Bunch Drive.
Okay, 7113 Battle Bridge Road, 701 Bunch Drive, 1227 Falls Church Road, 1909 Hadley Road, 1109 Savannah Drive, and 1109 South Wilmington Street. Is there anyone here to speak to any of these items? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Do I have a motion to approve? Confirming the liens?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have a petition to annexation. I'm
Just
sorry.
to clarify, 701 was withdrawn as
Was
it's been
withdrawn,
paid.
okay. Petition annexation for 7748 Midtown Market.
I'll just keep it short and sweet. It's a
Thank you.
standard annexation, largest parcel in the 5041 North planned development. The annexation petition submittal was a condition of subdivision approval, and I'm here to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay, we'll open the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Does anyone have any questions? Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have rezoning Z619, Davy, Harrington, Martin, and West. I understand this item was also being reported out of Growth and Natural Resources. This is a continuation of the public hearing. It's still open.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. So this case Z619 is what we refer to as the CAM property. It's actually a piece of property that's surrounded by Davy, Harrington, Martin, and West Streets. So this was discussed at Growth and Natural Resources. Hearing was held open to allow for that conversation at Growth and Natural Resources. And during the discussion there at committee, the committee members asked the applicant about the potential inclusion for affordable housing, or what the applicant was referring to as micro units, or very small residential units on the property. The applicant indicated a desire to continue that discussion, but they also indicated a desire to ask for an increase to the height. So right now what they're asking for is a cap of 20 stories. And they asked if there could be a consideration to go taller than that, to go to 40 stories. So through our conversation, what we discussed was a potential referral back to the Planning Commission, because what that represents is a less restrictive zoning district, because our height districts are all zoning districts. So if the council wants to entertain that request for additional conditions and additional height, the case could be referred back to Planning Commission, presented to them. They would return with a recommendation and a new public hearing for the City Council. Happy to answer any questions for you.
I have a question. I think the city attorney at Growth and Natural Resources brought up the fact that if they did this, would be a new case?
Well, a new district. It's a
Okay.
new zoning
That's right.
district.
Would it mean they would start all over again?
So procedurally, they would not, I'm sorry to interrupt,
That's
Madam
fine.
Attorney, but
I just want to make sure it's clear.
sure. And procedurally, it would not be a new case. And while this might feel different and weird, I admit it that it is. We don't do this very often, but it does happen on occasion where an applicant gets to this point in the process and they ask for something that is less restrictive. So it's got to be referred back to the Planning Commission for their review.
And they'll also have to amend their application to change
That's
the
correct.
zoning district.
Okay.
The way that the UDO is written, the height is actually a part of the district itself, which is a little different than some places. So, but they'll just go back, amend it, and then go through the Planning Commission process and come back again.
Okay.
Would the CAC be notified?
Yes, sir. So that's been part of our process, is to ask the applicant to go back through the CAC and present again.
That's why I'd ask for clarity, because we don't see these very often. I
Yes,
just want to
ma'am.
make sure the public understands the change or the request.
Okay, so the public hearing is still open, so I'll ask if there's anyone that wishes to speak to this. At this time, remembering this is still a zoning case, so there would be 8 minutes per side. Okay, seeing none, we will close the hearing and send it to the planning, close the hearing and we'll send it to the planning commission. Is that right? All right, Mac.
Max coming up.
Mac Paul, 421 Fayetteville Street. I don't really, my only comment is we're fine with, just wanted to clarify or make sure council hears that as that came out of the Growth and Natural Resources, we're fine with that motion and recommendation.
Okay.
I would like to say just one point of clarification of something we talked about in the Growth and Natural Resources Committee that I would just like to express today to Mac and to his clients. One of the things is we want you to be successful in having as many units that people might be able to rent. And one of the things we had talked about was the micro units. And in my opinion, us giving you the ability to build more smaller units of a price that might inherently be better for people to be able to attempt to live downtown where it's a smaller space and it accommodates their lifestyle, I'd really, really like you guys to continue to consider.
Thank you. And the additional height is primarily going to benefit the ability to produce those additional units, and that is fully the intent of the owners in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I just, and Mac, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but so I understand that we're going to refer this to the Planning Commission to amend the application in 3 ways. One is to add additional height. Two is to come up with a methodology to provide improved affordability in some of the units, micro or otherwise, and that you're going to work on continuing to improve the light screening in the parking deck from light trespass.
That's correct. We did consult with the architects who produced that additional condition that went above and beyond on screening, but we recognize it needs some further clarity where it doesn't specify that that headlights can't emanate from the deck.
Okay.
So do we need a motion on that?
Yes.
We've already got it?
You've
Do we need a
closed the
motion on
hearing?
that?
You've closed the hearing?
We closed the hearing.
I would just make a motion to allow the applicant to amend his application and return to the Planning Commission for further consideration.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, next we have text change TC1D18 omnibus list. Well, I guess, do we have a presentation first, or?
Yes.
Let me take just a second. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this item before we start? Okay.
This is a TC1D-18. It's the omnibus list. This is the final portion of the 2018 omnibus text change list. It will amend multiple sections of the UDO to modify regulations, correct typographical errors, and update various terms and titles.
Okay, excuse me,
Mayor?
yes, go ahead.
Since we're running long, might it be amenable for the council if we just say that we approve the new changes to the
We'll
omnibus
open the
list?
hearing. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to it? We'll close the hearing.
Move approval.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That takes us to TC 1219, unsafe buildings. Again, let me open the hearing and ask if there's anyone here that wishes to speak to this item. Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the hearing.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, consistency statement?
No, not for text change.
Only for zoning.
Yes,
With
for a
the
text change, yes.
Oh.
I move to adopt the proposed
there's
consistency
the
statement dated November 19, 2019, contained in the agenda material, and to approve the zoning text amendment.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you
Opposed?
read it with the omnibus?
Need to do it with the omnibus
Yeah,
list
go back.
too?
Sorry, I missed it. I was
Sorry.
Sorry.
reading an agenda.
Who made that
item.
motion?
So I guess
That
I
was you,
did, so I
Russ,
will
so-
move that we adopt the
The one we
proposed
spent so much
consistency
time on.
statement dated November 19, 2019, containing the agenda materials, and approve the zoning text amendment. So moved.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, now we're on TC 618 Cottage Court.
This is an item that was continued from the last public hearing. It was, at that time, it was requested that this item be continued to this public hearing so that the council could give more consideration to the item. So staff is available for any questions that the council may
Okay.
have.
Let me see, if there's anyone here that wishes to speak to this item? Okay.
I think you do have one in the back.
Oh, okay. Please come down and.
Good afternoon. Jason Meadows, P.O. Box 418, Clayton, NC, with Wakeland Design PLLC. Came before you last time to talk about this, and I'll keep it brief, but just want to reiterate, I think a couple of the sticking points last time were probably related to the square footage. And went back and kind of looked at the current cottage court language versus what we're proposing at a 1,500 square foot max. And even with the density bonus that's in the current text change, we would ultimately be left with less square footage than currently allowed. And I just want to keep that in mind as we kind of move forward. And excuse me, last time we went over a couple of the fixed costs associated with the development. And I don't want to lose sight of that. I feel like we've made a lot of big steps in the right direction. So I don't want to see this fail because of one thing in the future. So anyway, just please keep that in mind as we talk about it today.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this item? Okay. Let's close the hearing and bring it back. We had discussions about this at the last meeting. One was as you mentioned, the maximum floor area of the dwelling unit at 1,800 feet. We also had a discussion about the
district
using in R2 and R4.
Also the unit count.
The unit count. So 30 units sounds more like a small subdivision than a cottage court to me. So I'll just throw out a couple suggestions and you all can see what you think. I would suggest changing the maximum number of dwelling units to 15 and then allowing it in R2 and 4, but changing the maximum dwelling to units to 8. I would keep the maximum floor area of a dwelling unit 1,800 square feet and adapt the rest of the regulations.
So I just want to make sure if I heard this right. So 8, if you're talking about R2 and R4, is the number of units? Okay, just want to verify. Thank you.
And overall
15.
Keep it at 15?
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to suggest that we take the square footage down to 1,500 square feet. I think if we're trying maximum, yeah.
And I will go on the record saying that I do not support this in R2 and R4.
Well, the only thing about the square footage is, the big cost, or one of the big costs is in the dirt. So I'm just afraid if it's 1,500 and that's not what the market's really looking for, if they're too expensive, they're just not going to do it. They're just going to build a couple big houses on a lot. But, Mr. Thompson, you're in this business.
Right.
Maybe you can speak to that better than I can.
Right. I think the market will bear out what it should be. 1,500 to 1,800, it's still going to be a lot of money. But I have to agree with Mr. Cox. I don't believe this is a right usage in R2 or R4. I think that it's more suited for R6.
Okay, so what if we kind of compromise, just take out the R2 and R4, but allow the floor area to be 1,800 and the maximum number of units is 15?
I would support that.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consistency statement.
Oh, man.
Trying
You'd think we'd learn.
Trying to keep
by
somebody
now
changing
we've
their
gotten-
mind.
Sorry.
I've got to be hypervigilant.
You may know this.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 6, 2019, obtained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning text amendment. Sorry.
That's okay. Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
No.
There were 2 noes to
Steph
the
and I agree on
consistency
something,
statement?
but for different reasons.
Okay.
So 6-2.
Yeah, 6-2.
Okay. So then we move on to committee reports, growth and natural resources. Your first is their high impact, high visibility projects.
Okay. So there was a lot of discussion, and you do have some in your backup, but if you would like, I could just give you a little bit more information. Or if what you have in your backup is ample, I will read. The Growth and Natural Resource Committee recommends the item to be removed from the pending list with no action. Copies of the staff report is in your November 13 committee meeting attached.
Is there any value in sending it back to Appearance Commission for more specific guidance? It seemed like it was kind of all over the place.
So I've got a little bit more information. Okay. So Growth and Natural Resource Committee, I'll skip all that. First, we see that we have recommendations that the Appearance Commission recommend process to make design suggestion on high-impact, high-visibility projects to be removed from the committee. We don't recommend the city take any action at this time. Through our discussion, we found it difficult to shape criteria that both captures the key concerns but keeps the process manageable. In the future, the City Council could consider if this mechanism or something similar is policy worthy or has a policy priority. So we could just move it to the next council.
Okay.
We
have to vote on that?
I don't think so.
I think we do.
Holding it at the table, or?
Yeah.
You're just gonna hold it at the
We're
table?
just gonna, which is no action taken, so it's, the item is just at the table for
Just
the
at the
next council
table.
to consider.
To consider.
Okay.
Uh,
All
All in favor?
all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
So we've already dealt with Z619. I don't think I need to do that one again. And then last, we discussed a request that the Wake County Public School System District meet and, let me try this again. We discussed the request that the Wake County School District had made to the City Council to authorize a text change that would give more height allowance for civic buildings in residential areas. While we learned a lot about the challenges that the school district's having in developing schools under the current code, there was not full agreement on the committee to advance a text change. You will see from the packet recommendation that the committee recommends that the City Council request a community engagement process in partnership with the city and the school district to get community feedback, engaged support for such a change. With the City Council's direction, the plan would come back at a future point for direction.
So maybe the staff could come back with suggestions of what that would look like.
And it was a split vote. Thank
I
you.
mean, we have a text change process for civic engagement. But if,
I think the goal at the committee was to ask staff to engage with the public school system and then get some general consensus from the public as it relates to additional civic height, not just related to schools, but any civic building in a residential area, and then bring that back to the future council for direction.
I have a question because it's something we normally ask CAC sometimes. What was the split vote on?
There were some of us who were okay with moving forward, and then there were others who thought we needed more civic engagement with the community and the school system and the city.
wouldn't it be easier to look at what the specific issues in the UDO are for the schools?
Well, it wasn't.
Opposed to re-engaging.
So I will say to you, schools were just one of the aspects.
Or civic
It's civic
buildings.
uses.
Right.
I think that was some of the holdup was, could you just take schools out? They didn't think that would be possible, and that you would need to look at all the things that are within the civic community of items as it relates to a text change.
Yeah, but we established that you could establish schools as a separate category and treat them differently.
So I'll let the city attorney address that.
Yes, I think you'd have to do some other companion text changes with that. But I think you could have a height for schools in residential districts that wasn't the same as every single civic use. But, you know, you would probably want to look at all of them just as well to come to your ultimate conclusion, I would think.
In other words, there are ways to do it. The committee didn't have a consensus on what that was.
Right.
And since there's a new council coming on board, we thought maybe they would want to take that up.
Okay. Brett, I would suggest that we let planning bring this back to the new council before we send them on a civic engagement for the entire city with the school system, to determine and let the next council decide if they're going to pull schools out. Is it going to be all civic buildings? I think there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered.
Yes, and I
Before
will
we start on that.
And I will say that one of the questions we did ask the school system was, if we should do anything other than their request, would it hold them up for any schools that they have currently on the books that they need to build? And they said no, they had time to get this right.
Okay, so then if there is no opposition, could planning department make a presentation for the next council regarding this issue?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, healthy neighborhood.
Two pending items. Quick, are those pending items just going to report?
They just slow over.
Okay.
Those what?
No report from Healthy Neighborhoods Committee.
Neighborhoods, no report.
No, for transit.
Okay. And thank you all for clearing out your committees. I know it was a lot of work here at the end, so I appreciate all the extra meetings that everybody had. So we're going to do individual reports from the mayor and council. Before we start, I just want to say a couple words. Vanna. It's customary that sorry, every year as council members leave, they're presented with a gift from the city. And so Lou is going to show us all what this is. Thank you, Vanna.
Vanna, you look so nice.
It's great. And we just didn't want to go through having them all presented to us and having them all lined up on the table. So they're all back here with everybody's names and a stand for it. They're beautiful, actually. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so we'll use this time to allow anyone to give any final remarks or say what they would like. And we'll start with Mr. Cox.
Okay, one sec. I have to bring it up here. Okay, today is the last meeting of our 2017 Raleigh City Council. And as I look back on the past 2 years, I realize that together we have accomplished much. We have made City Council and city government more transparent and accessible, with televised and video recorded work sessions and free parking for those who attend our public meetings. Our weekly manager updates are now posted and publicly available on the city's website. We reached decisions on backyard cottages and short-term rentals, ending years of stalemate. We regulated scooters, allowing them as an alternative means of transportation while respecting our pedestrians, particularly our elderly and disabled. We supported numerous neighborhoods with conservation overlay districts. We established the Oberlin Village Historic Overlay District. We established the first on-street accessible parking downtown. We approved our first affordable housing projects paid for by our dedicated 1-cent property tax. We revised our sidewalk petition process and now consider pedestrian generators such as schools and parks when prioritizing those projects. We tightened the rules regarding stormwater runoff. We approved the Dix Park Master Plan, ensuring that the park will be realized without commercial development in the park. We stopped the practice of granting variances to our forestation rules to protect our watersheds. And we affirmed Raleigh's unique institution of citizens engagement, our citizen advisory councils, and strengthened them under the leadership of RCAC Chair Shelley Winters and the dozens who volunteer their time and talents to lead and manage them. Going forward, there is more that remains to be done. We need an affordable housing bond that will allow the city to acquire land for future affordable housing. We need to advocate for help from the state legislature to require including affordable housing, particularly when large residential projects are constructed. We should no longer be complacent with the construction of hundreds to thousands of units solely for the wealthy, and we should no longer be complacent with laws that allow easy eviction and displacement of large populations of city residents as a tool and precondition for new construction. We need to address our homeless population and those living in hotels and motels. We need to ensure that every child in Raleigh has a safe and healthy home. We need to end the days of school buses picking up and dropping off thousands of children at Motel 6, the Budget Inn, and others along Capitol, New Bern, and elsewhere. We need to protect our environment. We need a regional policy and a regional board for planning and deciding our resource needs, including our needs for stone. We need a regional approach to deciding if we need additional quarries, how large they should be, how they are operated, and where they should be located. Such decisions have far-reaching environmental and community impacts. We need to continue to help our young people. Too many are born into poverty and remain there. We need to find solutions that encompass education, jobs, and community support. They are our future, and we can no longer continue to lose generations of young people to poverty and crime. To close, this council has accomplished much in the service of our city. I am truly proud to have served with you. I thank you for your incredible service and dedication. It has been a privilege and an honor to work with each of you. And in the days ahead, I look forward to working with the incoming council to meet the many challenges that lie ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stuart?
I'll keep it brief. I want to echo something that Mr. Hall actually said earlier, which is this job is a really unique position in our city. And until you've done it, you don't quite understand. So whether you're in line at the grocery store or you are checking your email at 2 a.m., this job requires a lot of sacrifice and service. And I am grateful for each one of y'all's that you have given up over the past 14 years or the past 2. And I'm grateful for what you've done for our city and how much you care and the compassion you've shown for our city. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Russ?
Not as much as him, but a little more than her.
Okay.
And he wrote it down.
I wrote it down.
You wrote it down, even better.
So I want to begin by offering my deep respect for every person who's put themselves before the voters for the City of Raleigh Council. Those who have served know it's a job with few financial rewards, but rather the deep satisfaction of working together to fulfill the dreams and aspirations of all the citizens of Raleigh. Raleigh can be proud of our many accomplishments over the years, and many of the accolades that we've received are as the result of thoughtful and persevering leadership. That said, I feel like I have been the greatest beneficiary of all by having had the opportunity to make so many enduring friendships and work with so many talented people on the city council, on city staff, and in the community at large, who all cared about Raleigh more than anything. On the recent campaign trail, I noted 2 aspirational themes that are dear to me and that I expect will challenge the new council. First, that governing is about a little bit of conflict and a lot of compromise. Second, is that the popular meaning of being a progressive city favors an affluent and powerful majority. My measure of Raleigh's progressiveness is our commitment to becoming an equitable city. Here's a quote from the American Planning Association's recently adopted Guide to Equity Policies. Quote, applying principles of equity is an ethical responsibility. Social justice requires the examination of both the positive and negative impacts of community improvements on all community members so that all members benefit and no one group or neighborhood is unfairly disadvantaged. The failure to acknowledge equity in planning policy actually institutionalizes inequity. And so, as the new council moves from campaign aspirations to the hard work of balancing budgets and competing interests, I hope they'll embrace a commitment to institutionalizing equity and finding common ground as the means to withstand the increasingly polarized, personalized, and monetized politics, and instead stay focused on the common good.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
I would break this up a little bit, unfortunately, but this is at the request of some citizens. They wanted this to come before you all, before you, some of you leave. Last night, Councilman Stewart and I had the pleasure of meeting with some citizens along with staff to talk about Chavis Park. And the community members were concerned about the construction of the Heritage Plaza not being included in Phase 1, the John Chavis Memorial Park project. We previously received a staff report that identified potential options for the City Council to consider. After the meeting with members of the community last night, I would like to ask staff to bring back a special item for consideration at a future City Council meeting that would include identifying a project scope to develop, fabricate, and install an interpretive exhibit to honor the history of the park in the vicinity of the historic carousel house, including collaboration with the community, and identifying necessary funds and a recommendation funding source. So we're just asking staff to come back with those items to move this forward.
That require a
Yes.
motion?
It probably does.
Okay, so I'll
That was a
So
motion.
staff would come back with those items for the council to consider.
Correct.
Not us.
Correct. But a motion, but a motion has to be made for staff to start the process.
Second.
Okay.
Are you
All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Mayor, if I could, real quick, Mr. Branch, just in terms of setting expectations, I wouldn't suggest that for December 3rd, so maybe.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, just want to make that clear.
All right. Now to today and the last 4 years of me working with you all and 2 years for some, it has been a very good time and a learning experience. You all have pushed me and I have grown. We have worked long hours and a lot of emails and a lot of phone calls. And I just want to thank you all for the time and the commitment that you put in and the work and service that you provided. As we move forward, don't forget us. I'm sure some of you will be back in front of us standing at the podium as past council members have. But I say as you come before us, remember you two sat on this side. And I just look forward to us continuing to work together. And the ultimate goal of us all has always been to move the city forward for all people. And I look forward to the new council for us to work towards that. And for those that are parting, I look forward to still connecting and growing a great relationship. Thank you all for your service.
Okay, mine's going to be the shortest. Thank you to the people of District D for allowing me to serve you. It has been an honor. It's been an honor. Together we've accomplished much, and you will make me proud to call Raleigh and District D my home. I wish the new council all the best of luck, and look forward to seeing what the bold future you bring forward for our wonderful city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thompson.
Yeah, so since I'm the oldest one on the council, I did write some things down. The question is, can I see it? That's I just want to say that it's been an honor and a privilege for me to serve the last 4 years on the Raleigh City Council, and that I certainly appreciate the citizens of North Raleigh trusting in me to represent them here at the City Council and at City Hall and making decisions for them and for their best interest. I want to thank each one of you council members, and the same thing that Nicole and Ruffin alluded to. I think the average citizen has absolutely no idea of the sacrifices that these council members make in their personal life and their professional life to serve on this council. And you certainly don't do it for the money. You do it because you love your city. And I thank you guys for all of that and all that you've done. I especially want to thank our Mayor, Nancy McFarland, for all that she's done for this city. And, for all of your accomplishments, Nancy, I think without a doubt, your legacy is Dix Park. And without your determination and persistence to make that a reality, the city of Raleigh would not have Dix Park today. Your leadership and your refusing to accept no, to make sure, even though you were surrounded, and a lot of folks in this city said it couldn't be done, it won't be done, you refused to accept that. And that's your gift to this city for generations to come. And I really thank you for that. Thank you. The McFarland and Thompson family has been friends for over 30 years. And so when Nancy approached me about running for city council when Wayne decided he wasn't going to seek re-election, I told her, I said, I'll do it with one condition. And that condition is we will have to promise each other we will never let this interfere with our friendship or our relationship between our families. And, even though over a period of 4 years, we haven't always agreed on things, and admittedly, a couple of times we may have even hooked horns, I can tell you it has not affected our relationship at all. And our families are still friends, and that's because of the person that you are. It's because you value relationships and you're true to your word. And I certainly thank you for that, Nancy.
Thank you. things.
You know, in retrospect, and you probably don't know this, but you also did me a favor by encouraging me to run for city council at a time in my life when I needed a new purpose. 7 years ago, this past Sunday, we lost our daughter, Lauren. And if you were to ask anybody that's ever lost a child, I believe they will tell you there are two things in life that they seek. That's peace and that's joy. And through my faith in God and through His mercy and grace to me, I have received peace. But in my daily search for joy, I have learned that in order to get joy, you have to share it with other people. So in some small way, I hope that I have shared joy and brought joy to your lives, because I know you have done that to me. I especially want to thank my wife, Angie, who's my biggest supporter, and my family, my son, Travis, and his wife, Elizabeth, and my grandson, Tucker, and my wonderful family who's been so understanding, encouraging, and helpful to me, especially over these last 4 years. I want to thank Ruffin, Miss Gail, Robin, Lou, and everybody on the city staff and the city employees who are really so dedicated to your jobs. It's incredible, and we cannot thank you enough for what you guys do. And I really, really mean that. Also, a special thanks to Stacy Lundy and Megan Hinkle for being policy analysts who have helped us in so many occasions with citizens' concerns and issues. And you guys do a great job, and you make us at this table look good. And we haven't forgotten you, and thank you so much for that. And lastly, I just want to offer best wishes to the new council. And I hope they will work together to continue to make Raleigh the great city it is to live. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Before I read my statement, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. We did have an ad hoc committee to look at employee compensation, and we had one meeting, and we were not able to ever schedule a second meeting. But we did ask staff for a lot of information that I think would be useful for future council members to have available to them. So I'm hoping maybe that can be shared in the manager's update.
Can do that, absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I'd like to say I was disappointed in the judge's ruling on the RDU quarry, and I hope that there is some way that the RDU Airport Authority and the community can work together to figure out something that is a win-win for our community. And now I'll just read my last statement here. When I first started getting involved in community issues, I never dreamed I would end up serving a term on Raleigh City Council. The past 2 years have been an incredible experience, and as others have noted here, a lot of hard work. Raleigh is a big city facing a lot of important issues, and I think we would do well to recognize that serving on City Council really is a full-time job. If we accepted that reality, we could structure the job as such. Not only would that diversify our candidate pool, but it would enable us to meet more often and move things forward more quickly. A council composed largely of retired people, independently wealthy people, or people with very understanding employers doesn't really represent the diversity of our city. I hope the new council will seriously consider that change, as well as moving to staggered 4-year terms and increasing the number of council members. We haven't added a new council position since the mid-1970s, and Raleigh obviously has grown tremendously since then. As a council member, my focus has been on community engagement and on managing growth. I firmly believe our city is better when more residents are informed and involved. That's why I held monthly town hall meetings in District E. That's why I responded personally to emails, phone calls, Facebook posts, and requests to meet. That's why I began compiling and sharing a weekly list of city meetings and agenda items. And that's why I intend to continue to share that weekly update after I leave office. In evaluating rezoning requests, I focused on 3 criteria: environmental sustainability, appropriate supporting infrastructure, and contextual compatibility as stated in our UDO. Quote, "The intent of the residential infill compatibility standards is to accommodate and encourage compatible development in existing neighborhoods while reinforcing the established character of the neighborhood and mitigating adverse impacts on adjacent homes." I firmly believe that strong infill compatibility standards help mitigate gentrification and preserve more naturally occurring affordable housing. My goal has been to be the kind of city council representative that I would want for myself. Someone who listens, someone who's responsive, and someone who works to build consensus. Based on the feedback I've received from my constituents, I'm proud to have met that goal, and I'm proud of all we've accomplished together. I'm especially grateful to Kay Crowder, David Cox, and Russ Stevenson for their support, their mentorship, and their friendship. I'm also very appreciative of the dedication and hard work of our city staff, and I'd especially like to acknowledge Megan Hinkle for her support as my policy analyst. Additionally, I want to thank all of my family, friends, and supporters who've been with me the past 2 years. And most of all, I want to thank my husband, Richard, who's been by my side every step of the way, giving up 2 years of our retirement to try to make Raleigh a better place for everybody. Because I love this city, I intend to remain involved as a community activist. I hope more Raleigh residents will pay attention and get involved as well, so that Raleigh can truly be an inclusive community that represents the best of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to take a few minutes to thank everyone that I've worked with over the past 12 years, all of you here and many past city council members, members of other local governments, state and federal elected officials, and thousands of Raleigh citizens. Most of all, I want to thank the staff here at the City of Raleigh, especially Robin, Gail, Ruffin, Lou, Sarah. When it comes to staff, a mayor once told me that you can have success with a mediocre council and a great staff, but not the other way around, because we know who really does the work around here. It's been my pleasure and my honor to serve the City of Raleigh for 4 years as a city councilor from District A and 8 years as mayor. The experience has enriched my life, and I hope that my service to the city has done the same for Raleigh. Raleigh is an incredible city, unlike any other in the world. We as a community have created this place, and I know that as a community we will continue to protect and encourage and make big dreams possible for the future. Generations of citizens have dedicated their lives to making the city a better place. That's why we do what we do. We work hard to leave a better city than when we started. We lay the groundwork for opportunities for generations to come. Being mayor is truly a public service, and I want to thank the public for putting their trust in me. That means more to me than you'll ever know. A big thank you to my family for all of the sacrifices they have made and support that they have given to help me in this role. And one other thing to say, when I was writing my State of the City speech, someone said to me, "What's the tone of your speech going to be?" And I said, well, it's really kind of a love letter to Raleigh. So I wrote a love letter to Raleigh. So, dear Raleigh, I have known you for 35 years, and we've been together for 12. When I first met you, I was like, whoa, I have been with much cooler cities. There is no place to party, and your nicest restaurant is in a barn. Even though I had known you about 20 years before we started getting serious, there was still a lot I didn't know about you. First of all, seems like everybody wants to be your friend. You are so popular. I felt very special in 2007 when you started hanging out with me. Then in 2011, we started going steady, and you were totally my main crush. I think we've both grown and changed a lot in this relationship. You have really grown up, and you're into so many new and exciting things. And it's not that I don't love you anymore. I do. Really, you're awesome. It's not you, it's me. I just need to start seeing other people. But I will always be here for you, and no matter what you need, just give me a call. I know you're going to go on to do great things. I'll be around, and we'll still get together from time to time. But remember, Raleigh, you will always be in my heart. Love, your mayor. So that takes us to appointments. Yay!
Good. Nice segue.
Right. How can I follow that? Your Appearance Commission, you have 4 vacancies. Corey Mason received 7 votes, Chad Parker received 7, and Candace Andre received 4. So Mr. Mason and Parker will be appointed and leaving 2 vacancies. Civil Service Commission, 1 vacancy, no nominees. Historic Cemeteries Advisory Board, 2 vacancies, no nominees. Planning Commission, 1 vacancy. Matt Tomasula received 3 votes. Michael Stagner received 4, so that will be carried over. Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority, Nancy Picard received 3 votes. Seppi Sadie received 4, so that will be carried over. Raleigh Transit Authority, Crash Craig had withdrawn his name. And Brian Burnett received 6 votes, so he would be appointed. Sister Cities, 1 vacancy, no nominees. Substance Use, 1 vacancy. Tracy Freeman was nominated by,
Me.
I've got it, but I didn't write it down.
Just in case you're not telling the truth.
Stewart. So that will be carried over. And I see we should take nominations for a new mayor. Is that correct here? Do we take nominations for a new mayor, or do we?
The new mayor? No, this is the deputy mayor is going to help us gavel out.
Oh, very good. Okay, then on nominations, Appearance Commission, you have 1 vacancy as the term of Corey Bates is expiring. He is eligible and would like to be considered for reappointment.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, the Board of Adjustment, this one gets a little complicated. You have 4 members who have either resigned or their terms expiring and they do not wish to be considered for reappointment. As you remember, you asked that these be held while some discussions was taking place. So Karen Camerat, Neil Reineman do not wish to be considered for reappointment. David Smith, who was a city alternate member, has resigned, and since the agenda was published, we received a resignation from Jamie McCaskill. So you have 5 vacancies, 4 regular, and 2 alternate, 1 alternate.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate, and unfortunately, we had 2 people, and one of them this morning referred and told me she was not going to be able to do it at this time. But I would like to nominate Rodney Swank for the Board of Adjustment. In addition, I'd make a motion to suspend the rules and appoint him today.
Second.
Appoint Rodney today.
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
I'll figure out how many that leaves.
Okay.
The Raleigh
Three and an
Transit
alternate.
Authority, you have 4 vacancies. The terms of, I'm very sorry, the chairperson, Ms. O'Mckley, I'm not sure how to say it, I'm sorry. Karen Ringe and Nathan Spencer and Linda Wire are all expiring. Ms. Wire does not wish to be considered for reappointment. Ms. Ringel does wish. I have not been able to get in touch with the other 2, so I do not know their desires on being considered.
So perhaps we should just hold this until you're able to find out if they want to be reappointed.
Yeah,
Is
makes
that
sense.
amenable to council?
Yes.
Okay, you could, now, Ms. Ringe does wish to be considered, but we'll hold them all and
Let's just hold
bring
them
it
all,
up.
we'll do
Okay.
it all at once.
All right, the next one is Planning Commission. The term of David Novak is expiring, and he is eligible and would like to be considered, so you do
I'd
have.
also like to nominate Blaney Chang.
So can I, in the midst of that, make a motion that we approve or reapprove David Novak? Second.
Well, what we did last
Reappoint.
time was when we had a new nominee, we held it over.
Okay.
That's, That's what
Because
you
we have two
normally
nominees
do if
now.
You have
Okay.
a new nominee, so we'll put it
Okay.
on the next.
Oh, you made another, to replace him, is that what you're saying? Because there's,
Yeah.
then there's some coming up, okay.
Madam Attorney?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
I think you received by email the minutes of the November 6th meeting, regular meeting and work session, and if you feel comfortable, I'd ask you to consider.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And the last thing, I'd like to say thank you from the clerk's office. Thank you for your service to the city and the citizens, and thank you for support of our office.
Thank you.
And we better see you again.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask the deputy mayor to bang the gavel and end the meeting. Yay, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.